to give you an overall view of 2026 as a whole.
Yes, and I'm happy to report that we're alive, and I'm super happy that I was able to figure it out.
But you,
And by the way, guys, today, November 4th, immigration level plan is supposed to be released by Canadian government. If they're going to release it, which is very likely during our session, then we're going to interrupt this session and actually talk about it and see what the government has in store for us. So make sure that you hang out with us right until the end, because maybe in the end we will take a second to have our panelists to reflect on immigration level plan. And yeah, Cory, I think we're good, and we can
all right,
start with your session about express entry in 2026, what to prepare and what to expect.
I'll start. Yeah, the levels plan possibly could come out in the middle of my speaking, so hopefully I don't look too bad with my predictions. So let's let's hope for the best here. I think I have a good prediction. So let me share my screen. All right. So again, we're going to be talking about express entry in. Can you see my screen, Elena? Yeah.
Yeah, we're all good.
Okay, thanks. All right. So express entry in 2026, what to expect. So again, not every little program I'm talking about here, just the overall numbers, the overall kind of outlook for the entire year. All right. So the first thing would be the targets. So we know, again, the 2026 levels, what they were predicted to be when they released the last plan, which was 380,000 permanent residents for this year, upcoming year, 2026. So again, let's see if it changes today. The new levels plan will be coming out. There has been talk of, things that could change potentially. When we're looking at the numbers overall, like we are seeing a downward trend from year to year. So from 2023, obviously, and 2024, and then now to 2025, and then 2026. So it is been a downward trend. Obviously, coming out of COVID, the numbers were high, right? Like the government was just taking massive amounts of permanent residents every year, and with that, there became problems, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit. So we will see the continuing trend down. However, as I talked about in the beginning, there always needs to be a response and some actions to other factors. So, for example, the provinces have been complaining that they're just not, they got really a lot less immigration targets in 2025 than they did in 2024, and they were really complaining. So there has been some talk, the immigration minister, about perhaps changing the numbers a bit on the provincial side. So again, we'll see what changes today. I don't think we're going to see any drastic changes. We're not going to see them bump it up to 500,000 again, right? Or like into the stratosphere, 1 million. This is just never going to happen right now. So I think that we're going to see a similar number, 380, but it could go up a little bit. Um, that's first. The second would be the continuing like shift from, as we talked about, high volume numbers, right? In 2022, 23, 24, huge amounts, high volume, to now a more like sustainable growth and labor market alignment, right? So instead of just an wide open doors and low scores and lots of different pathways taking thousands and tens of thousands, it's now a more strategic shift that they've done to be targeting, specific categories if it's express entry, with sponsorships as well. They're leveling the numbers out right now, right? To try and find that healthy balance, right? And to sustain those levels and those labor market impacts, right? So when we do have job shortages in certain sectors, they're going to target those, and that's going to continue, right? We already see that in 2025, and we expect that to continue into 2026. So another factor, what's going on, will be the temporary resident levels. So there was always been, a huge amount of temporary residents in Canada. And we see that with people on study permits and work permits. And, their goal again was to reduce that number down. And the reason for that is housing and infrastructure pressure. So in Canada, there is a huge, problem right now with just housing, and the cost of living and the cost of everything rising, rising, rising. And, not that immigrants are to blame, but they're also in the same boat where, rent for them is they're coming over and it's hard to find a good rental. a cheap rental. And it's hard for Canadians as well. So there has been some sort of plan to reduce the amount of temporary residents to a sustainable level again, where it's that healthy number that the economy can take, as well as that people are still getting their education, coming and doing their school, coming to work, and we're still fulfilling getting those jobs filled that need to be, right? So the other thing is that express entry still remains the number one main federal economic pathway, right? So there's other pathways, sponsorship is a different pathway, but through like the economic pathways, such as the PNPs and the express entries, whether it be, federal skilled workers for trades or Canadian experience class, we still see express entry being that number one producer of economic immigrants, right? So that's the first kind of what the overall picture is. So let's dive down into a little bit deeper into like specifically for express entry, right? So first, like francophone targets, we see this, every year so far is the number of francophone French-speaking people who are being granted permanent residence is just continuing to increase. So it's actually reversing the trend of overall immigration going down, numbers of permanent residents being lower, but in Francophone category, it's going up every year. So that means if you are a French speaker or if you have the interest in learning French, I would highly recommend it. It's not a pathway that is going to start shrinking. I don't believe we'll see today, in the levels plan, I don't think we'll see any movement on the French numbers. I could be wrong, of course. But most likely, like we saw this year, I think we were doing the math, it was 36,000 the ITAs for French Francophone speakers, which is a huge number. So if you have an interest in the French language, learning it, or if you speak French, express entry would be a very, very good pathway for you, for sure. The next factor, again, is those occupation-driven selections. So those would be, your category-based targets, which we expect to continue. So whether it's healthcare, trades, or we had STEM, we had education, we had previously agriculture. So all of those pathways not all of them will continue, but we will continue seeing those targeted occupations, and I'll dive into those new categories, which are proposed already for 2026 would be leadership. So like senior managers. So think like bank managers, production supervisor managers of the whole plant, these very high level management positions that they're going to be targeting, proposed to be targeting this year. Another one would be research and innovation, which would be scientists and researchers. So if you are in those science fields or in the research fields, university researchers, those would be good professions and targeted this year, upcoming 2026, most likely, if they stick to their words, which we have to wait and see. And another new one, which is pretty interesting, is national security and defense, which is military personnel from allied countries. So that's a very specific category. If you do have a military background in an allied country, I'm not sure how that category would work, exactly how, like you'll have to prove that you're in that, previous military experience. And that is an interesting topic. I guess they're trying to fulfill, like, they have targets of, they want to increase the military in Canada. So that would be one way to do it. So we will see these continuing occupations. I'm sure we will still see trades. I'm sure we will still see health. All these categories will still exist. And if you are in them, it's a great opportunity for express entry for sure. And even if you're not in them, we can talk about, I'm sure we'll be talking about, in the group will be talking about potentially switching into these targeted based categories. Another factor we can see for 2026 is system modernization. So they already use AI in their processing of the cases. So they have systems that they use that, in some cases, maybe a human being is not even looking at your case when you've submitted your visa application or your work permit application or whichever it be. They have AI and they can use automated platforms, and they do that to not only select people like criteria wise. So like the draws that they're producing, as well as the applications that they are processing. So it is it's becoming a new thing. AI is everywhere now, so that will continue. And then the temporary residents to see improved transition pathways. So again, that's that in Canada focus, which we will see continue as well. So last year we saw this, we didn't have a single draw last in 2025 yet of that was either general or federal skilled workers. So it is not, we're not taking people from outside Canada in those express entry draws. Generally, those are all people who are coming from in Canada, unless you fall into one of those targeted occupations or French, and those people can be coming from anywhere, right? But the goal here was to focus on the in Canada population who are already here, who have gone to school, who have that work experience in Canada and have transitioning them to permanent residence. So that's kind of what we can see. It's almost similar to 2025. There are a lot of similarities to 2025. I don't think we're going to see anything too drastically different happen in 2026, to be honest. So yeah. Then the next thing that we'll talk about is what you guys should expect with all those changes and what does that mean in reality is it's just going to be a little bit similar to 2025. We're going to have high competition and high CRS scores. I don't think, the days of having those 486 points general draws that we saw back in like 2022, 23, I don't think we're going to see those days again. I could be wrong. There would have to be something massively shift for things to change in that direction. But I think what we saw in 2025 was a high, for Canadian experience class, for example, high threshold of points. And I think we'll still see that trend continue. I think, hopefully there'll be some relief. I honestly think it's almost unfair to the people who are here in Canada, who have worked their butt off, going to school, getting their education, getting their work experience, and sitting, a lot of people sitting in the high 400s and low 500s, and the scores being where they are. 534 we've been at, or 533 was the most recent draw. So I think, we could possibly see that trend continue. Hopefully there's some relief though. And we'll see with the immigration plans today if there's any kind of hint that they're looking at changing things to maybe target more Canadian experience class. We'll have to see. Another thing, like as we were talking, more value on Canadian experience and obviously French proficiency. So it is going to be that Canadian, audience target that they're going for again with those targeted draws, with those, labor shortages that they need to fill in Canada. And there's people already here who can do that. So that's why they're doing these targeted draws, right? For the most part, most of the people who are in the targeted occupations are in Canada. Of course, some of them could be outside of Canada, and that's good too. And of course, French proficiency. So again, the French numbers are just going up, up, up. That should continue. Again, yeah, category-based draws over all program draws. So we're not going to see those all program, no program specified draws that we've seen in the past, or specifically, federal skilled worker draws. I don't think it's going to happen. So if you're outside Canada, and you're, just sitting in the pool, you might not have those targeted experiences, those target knock codes that they're looking for. I think you should kind of pivot and think about getting into either a targeted occupation or perhaps trying to come to Canada and get that Canadian experience, right? That is going to be a big target for this year, continuing in 2026. And advantage for those aligned with priority sectors. So again, if you're in that healthcare, you're in those trades, those ones are just not going to go away, right? Those ones are always, if you're a nurse, if you're a plumber or a carpenter or a dentist, you're always going to be targeted. Like that's just going to continue for sure. We'll see what, different knock codes will come in and different knock codes will come out. For example, in trades, I'm not so sure that the cooks will be there in 2026. We'll see. Everyone was a little bit shocked that they included cooks as a specific knock code in the trades. But I think that we'll see obviously changes here. So, maybe cooks come out and something else comes in. We'll have to see. Again, with that happening in January, the new targeted occupation, so the new knock codes list will come out, and that's a good time to reassess your situation at that time and say, okay, if you are not in one of those targeted occupations at that time in January 2026, you can look at yourself and say, all right, I need to do 6 months as a whatever, something from the new list, a painter, or if it, whatever, who knows what it could be. And then 6 months and you're in that category. So that's the best time to reassess and to look for those priority sectors that they're looking for yourself. Lastly, strategic steps for 2026. So what do you do? What can you do to hopefully take advantage of understanding what's going to happen and align yourself so that you will be in a good position. So the first thing is like always audit your profile, and your make sure your Express Entry profile is up to date. That your most recent job information is there, that you have all the correct information. Your primary knock code is correct, right? If you're in one of those targeted occupations, make sure everything is done correct. And then again, with language, always reassess your language if you can. It is the number one, points level factor that you can like easily influence, not easily, okay, but influence is working on your language, whether it be French or English, and then gaining that experience, right? So if you continuously gain the experience, your points will rise when you hit that 1 year, 2 year, 3 years of work experience, whether it be in Canada or outside. So keep gaining those points factors in your CRS score and keep up, make sure your profile is up to date, number one. Target your stream in Canada Francophone or category based. So again, that goes back to what I just said in January 2026. If you're in Canada and you're working in, IT and it's not one of the targeted draws, but something similar is, and you can, maybe change your direction a little bit in your job and just work 6 months in one of those targeted occupations, that's a good plan, right? Or if you're, you're absolutely, you don't know what to do and your job is not aligning with any of them, and you can just go become a carpenter for 6 months or a bricklayer or something like along those lines. A lot of clients and people are doing this, and it is a successful strategy for a lot of people that are trying to switch and pivot. You need to be able to move quickly and strategically, I guess to say. And then obviously Francophone. So I have a ton of people that I talk to, on every day on consultations. And they're like, should I learn French? And my answer is always like, if you have the interest to do it and the time and the ability, absolutely. It is almost an open door pathway to permanent residence. Like we saw the Francophone draws, the French-based draws, as low as 379 points in 2025, the beginning of the year, which is the lowest, I think, score that we had out of any of the occupations or any of the targeted draws or any of the any draw was the lowest was French. So yes, technically it is like a very great pathway for you if you can learn French, or if you already have that French in your back pocket, and you've never stepped foot in Canada, but you are a French speaker, absolutely, create your profile, get your scores up, and get into those targeted draws for sure. Also, strengthen your documents. Get things ready, right? I've talked to a lot of people recently, and they didn't have an ECA for their the home bachelors, for example, or they didn't have their job letters ready. For back home work. Get these things done, right? And especially for points scoring factors such as like ECAs or language scores. Those are your easiest things. It's like, you do your West for your bachelor's and now you have 2 degrees instead of just one Canadian 2 year program. Now you have bachelor's and Canadian. You have 2 programs, and your points go up. It's something that's low hanging fruit, as we call it. Getting your job letters done, getting things done now that are for your back home experience. Check it off your list. It's out of your mind. You don't have to worry about it, and things are done correctly, and you can focus on other things, right? And language scores, of course, always reassess your language. Try to hit those max scores, whether it's IELTS or CELPIP or another test, TCF, TEF, whatever scores you're going for. Always try to increase your scores with language. I know it's not fun to do language tests a bunch of times, but it is like the number one factor for increasing your scores, right? So and there's always room for improvement until you hit those max scores, which your goal should be to do that. And most people don't take this test seriously. They just walk in and they just do it. And my advice would be like, take it seriously, study for it, look, take a tutor, take a lesson, and really concentrate on those factors that you can control. And then, yeah, monitor updates. 2020, these announcements, like things today that they're talking about the new levels plan, will shape the 2026 draws, right? So you have to be up on the news and know what's going on and attending like sessions like today, right? Where you can learn about all the different options. So you have to be, dive right into the immigration right now. It's the days of it being very easy 75-point draws and TR to PR. These days are gone, right? Things are gonna be more competitive now, and they're gonna continue to be competitive. So it's up to you to be able to strategize a good plan. And if you need help with that, you can reach out. There's tons of immigration consultants. Reach out for help if you need to come up with strategy, if you're not sure of what to do, right? Whether you're in Canada or outside of Canada, it doesn't matter. You can come up with a strategy, right? And keep following the changes. So as we talked about, the numbers today will give an idea of what you can expect moving forward in 2026, as well as constant changes, right? We see them all the time. Updates. There's things that happen in the world that influence, and in Canada, that influence the numbers. So always try to strategize that plan and have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. So that's what my last point is have a backup plan. So if express entry is not working for you, if your points are 485, you have to try to think of other pathways, potential things you can do. Explore PMPs. We don't know what's going to happen immigration wise. If PMP numbers will increase, that could be a good sign and say, okay, like if the level plan today says PMP numbers are increasing from 50,000 to 100,000, maybe that's an option for you. And if your province gets a higher level, that could be something to pivot to. There are other pathways. We have countless people who were in express entry and they've pivoted towards like spousal sponsorship, for an example, if that's an option for them, right? So there are other pathways, and of course, everyone's going to talk in more detail about these specific pathways as the days go on here on the summit. So yeah, I think like just the overall lesson here is that it's not going to be a lot different from 2025 in terms of there's no magical program coming to be. The points are not coming down to 450. We're not getting a TR to PER. It's not happening. There's no 75-point draw coming. So yeah, just do what you can to increase your scores. And again, it all comes down to having that strategy, right? And to be able to pivot and come up with a good plan for 2026, looking at the numbers, looking at yourself, looking at your experience, and what can you do to best put yourself in that position for success.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cory. Now we're going to jump into some questions. We got a lot of questions. And guys, just letting you know that all the replays are going to be available on YouTube. If you want to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, please subscribe. But I'm going to drop a link. And then also you can ask your questions either here on Zoom webinars, or you can ask your questions in chat on YouTube. That's just for the next 2 days as well, today and tomorrow and the day after. So if you cannot log into Zoom for whatever reason, please do go on YouTube and you can ask your questions there as well. So let's go to the first question. The first question is, I kind of lost it here. Here. All right. The first question is from Krunal, and sorry if Zoom doesn't show me the full name. And Krunal is asking, I have 528 CRS under CEC, so 528 is pretty good. And my postgraduate work permit is expiring January 2026. What do you think of the score and getting an invitation to apply with 528 expiration of work permit January 2026?
Say first, I like that's a great score, and historically that would be just like an easy and just wait and you'll be drawn, right? But now with the uncertainty and just seeing, we had what, 4 draws in a row that were 534 and then one 535 or 533. If there's anything you can do, for example, if you can take an English test and bump something up a point here, a point there, I would recommend it. I know it's not the best, it's not fun to do an English test constantly. But if there's any way to just boost yourself into those 530s, that would be the first thing. The second thing, there are other options. We have to wait and see what the plans state today. It's, when we're looking at running out of time, there are other options on the table. I would recommend reaching out to someone, a consultant, someone who can strategize with you, to see if there's anything potentially to extend your work permit. Um, yeah. Other than that, like it's honestly a sit and wait and just bump up what you can. Like, are you going to be able to hit, there's other factors here. When will you hit your next year of work experience where your scores will go up, right? So it's hard to say just give you one answer that's here, do this, but there are, factors at play here that we have to understand. So strategizing would be good to do with a consultant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then I think that the situation of this individual is like obviously good, but it is tricky just because of that work permit expiration. And a lot of times what we talk about is about the fact that when people don't handle that transition or situation correctly, or like strategically, a lot of times it may lead to the loss of a job, right? Because if you do lose your status in Canada working, then like you will have to quit, right? Because you will not have right to work in Canada. And a lot of times it's just completely unnecessary. And we just see so many times when people like lose their jobs, or even worse, like move back home for like literally no reason. So I do think, I just want you to know, even though it's not, it's really difficult to get into all the nitty gritty right now without knowing your exact situation, as Cory said, but I want you to know that like the likelihood is really high that you will be able to like just figure it out and like just extend your working status, and and like see how things go, increase your points if necessary, or like whatever the case is. It's just it needs to be done properly and not just winging it. Because how many times, Cory, you had a conversation when a person just applies for visitor record and we're like, no,
The last thing to do.
the last thing you need to do is apply for visitor record. But again, it needs to be done smartly with knowing all the ins and outs of the process. So, yeah, okay.
Reach out for help if you need it.
Yeah, and again, we want to provide as much information as possible, of course, like for free. But there are many kind of things here.
Factors that we don't. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So let's see a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to our next speaker, Lisandra, who already here. So let's just see a couple more questions for Cory. Let's just see.
CRS score questions.
Yeah, if you see, Cory, any good question, just go ahead with it.
Well, someone's asking like express entry is not working. What would be the different pathways? So again, if it depends, like it's hard to know. It really depends on your individual circumstances. What job are you doing? What knock code are you in? Like, and again, looking at your situation, how long you have on your work permit, potentially, getting into those targeted occupations could be a good path, right? And looking at your skills, if anything that you do or have done aligns with those, that could be an option going forward. This is the thing about 2026 is I don't think we're going to see a lot of difference from 2025. I think we will see those high CRS scores. So that's what I'm saying, like to strategize a plan and to come up with a plan that if at X point you need to reassess. So I would say January 2026 would be a good point to reassess your situation. Look at the targeted occupations that are going to be announced in that year, and potentially get into one of those, right? Again, like if you're already in the pool of candidates and your job is just not one of those, it could be a good idea to go do it, right? So we've had lots of clients do this. I've had people, become welders for 6 months and then secured an ITA. I've had clients who got, ECA, they did their ECA and they, changed to that and got their permanent residence. So there's multiple different pathways to do. Again, you need to strategize this. And there's also those other options which are not express entry based, which could be, spousal sponsorship often is on the table for some people. It becomes an option. They say, look, I've been living with my common law partner for a year. Express entry is just not happening. Maybe I should just go down the sponsorship route. And sometimes it does make sense. So again, strategize, look outside of the box kind of, and don't just do the same thing. If the same thing that you're doing is not working, you need to try and pivot.
Yes, absolutely. And I like this question, and I know that it's obviously speculation, but Ramta Run is asking, based on your experience, what would be the lowest CRS score for CEC in 2026?
Okay, let's just like break it down. Like historically, the best months are always the summer months, right? So if you go back on look through the past draws, every summer has the best lowest amount of draws. The low this year was, I believe, 518 we saw in 2025. So um, if we can kind of if my prediction is that 2026 will mirror a little bit 2025, it will be similar. We could kind of see the same, I guess. Hopefully it goes down from there. I hope that they do because, like I said, it is tough for those CEC people who are sitting in the 490s and low 500s, sitting there, and maybe they've maxed their English scores. Maybe they've done, they're not going to hit their second year of experience for a long time. So, you know, you feel for these people who are sitting in those positions, right? And I really do hope the scores get lower. So again, we'll have to look at the numbers that are going to be announced today and see if there's any kind of clue that we can, ascertain maybe that CEC will have a higher targets. Let's look. But I think we could probably, my prediction would be similar to what we saw in 2025. So into those, I think it's not coming down into the 470s or 80s or 90s. I think we're going to see 500 plus scores throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, I think it's important that like hopeful is really good to be hopeful, right? But it's important also to stay realistic, and that's what we always try doing, staying just realistic, so you guys don't just sit and wait for a miracle, because that miracle may not be coming anytime soon.
Exactly. There was another question. I'm planning to apply through PNP, Federal Skilled Trades. I'm a hairstylist. Which province is best for me? It's hard to predict which province is best for you, but I just want to point out that is a good plan. Like PNP, hopefully, through the levels announced today, hopefully we do see that increase to PNPs. The immigration minister was talking about this just a couple weeks ago in Nova Scotia, that the provinces are, desperately asking for more PNPs. So we'll see today again the numbers plan. Like we'll have to come back later today and once the levels are out and look at it, and hopefully we do see that increase to PNPs, because that could be another pivot for people in 2026. If we do see those increases in the PNP levels for 2026, it's been a bad year in 2025 for specifically we're in Ontario. So for OINP for us, it's been a bad year. Like the numbers are way down. We haven't
Yeah.
had a express entry based draw under PNP. Like for all the express entry streams, we haven't had one in 2025 for OINP. So hopefully we can, like, no human capital, no skilled trades, no French speaking in OINP. So hopefully we can see a pivot there as well, and where the PNP programs do become a better option as they were in 2024. A lot of people came through the PNPs. So that's another thing. If you're sitting in the lower scores, the 400s to the to the like the low 400s to the medium to the high 400s, that PNPs often were the pathway to go to, and it hopefully will come again.
Yeah. Especially for Ontario, I'm really hoping for, because
Yeah,
clearly they had a big break, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Everybody's wondering about stem draw. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, we didn't have one, so this whole year.
Hmm.
And I know that I talked to a lot of people who are insurance agents, which were included in that category for some reason. I think that was included in STEM. Um, and who were in that job, like hoping and praying, and it just never happened. So of course it still could. We're not done. The year's not out. We still have a couple months, so it could happen. But most likely, if and when it does, if it were to happen, the points would be extremely high. I would imagine 500 plus for STEM as well. You have a lot of high skilled occupations in there. Most of them are engineers. So you can imagine they all have like very good education and experience, and so most likely those STEM draws, if they do happen, would be higher points for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, generally STEM professionals, just as a category, they tend to score very high. But now, considering that we haven't had draws, it would be probably sky
Okay.
rocketing. Yeah.
So someone's asking how to calculate the score. Please elaborate on this. I just like pointing out that, the CRS score is based on your education, your English level, and your work experience, how long you've been working. So there's a CRS calculator you can go to on the Government of Canada website, and you can calculate your score based on your age. You plug in all your information, and it spits a score out at you. And that's what we're talking about.
Yes. I have a question from Comlan. I'm a cybersecurity professional and a francophone.
Hmm.
So what should be my target? Like which direction to take here?
I think Francophone is the easiest. Just
Yeah.
by the amount and the numbers that we're seeing, as I mentioned during my presentation, 36,000 ITAs issued in 2025 alone, should give you the impression that that should be your target. I believe cybersecurity specialists are included in STEM as one of the only IT jobs, but again, we haven't had one STEM draw. So absolutely, with the numbers where they are that we saw, as I mentioned, as low as 370 something points, 379, absolutely, Francophone should be the target for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the cutoff is lower for francophone. So if you can score CLB 7 for French, then yeah. Okay, we have a question from Pankaj. Pankaj got an ITA from healthcare draw. Woo!
Yay.
Now working as RN, registered nurse in Ontario, almost 1 year from November 18th, 2024. But also has 1 year of foreign work experience and another 2 years of foreign work experience. So anyways, the question is, let's just see. Okay, there is a lot of abbreviations in that message. I cannot understand. But I think the question is mainly about putting the job and job duties and responsibilities in employment letter. So can you just give like a rough guidelines for somebody who already received ITA and gathering documentation for foreign experience and Canadian experience, what their employment letters should include, and just rough guidelines, tips to that?
Sure. First, for the Canadian experience, I understand you're not yet at your 1 years, but you already have the ITA, if I understand it correctly. So for a Canadian employment letter, you don't want to get it signed before you hit your 1 year, right? If you're hitting that November 18th, submitting a letter on November 4th, dated November 4th, you're not at your 1 year. That's a big problem. So number one, wait. I don't know when you received your ITA, but wait until after you hit your 1 year mark. Technically, count your hours, count your days that you've worked there, and figure out exactly when your 1 year is, and then make sure your letter is dated after that. And obviously done correctly. Job duties paraphrased, not copied from the not code. All the relevant information there, hours, time that you've worked there, your job titles, everything needs to be done correctly. And same with foreign, the exact same thing with foreign employment letters. So the date doesn't matter as much for the foreign employment because you're not there anymore. So it can be a new date. That's fine. It can be like today's date if you'd like. But again, those factors need to be mentioned. So your job duties, paraphrased from the not code, not copy and pasted, and all the relevant information of your hours, your job titles, your hours per week, all that stuff needs to be there. And then, proof that you were paid for these jobs, right? Pay stubs, tax documents, whatever else you can come up with. And for foreign, try to just go hard on all sorts of different documentation if possible. So contracts, job offers, relieving letters, promotion letters, anything else you can provide, the more the better with foreign. The thing is to try to really overwhelm them with documentation proving the experience.
Thank you. All right, tricky question from Kush. If I did not show my foreign experience on study permit applications, but I did show it while applying for postgraduate work permit, can I still claim points for that for express entry?
I mean, you obviously you can do whatever you want. There is some risk to that, obviously. It's good that you mentioned it on at least one of them. A lot of people tried to use this experience and they've never mentioned it before.
Yeah.
And that's even more riskier. So, of course, it's IRCC. There is always a risk that they can come back and question that. The way to get in front of it and to hopefully mitigate that would be just to provide an overwhelming amount of documentation to prove it, right? Hopefully you Google a company, there's an online presence and you can say, okay, because IRCC will Google the company and say, where is this company? And then again, just providing all the documentation properly and everything you can provide to prove it, right? So not just the employment letter, that's it. That probably won't fly. So employment letter, pay stubs, proof you were paid, income certificates, tax documentation, again, job offers, contracts, promotion changes, letters, anything you have from them, relieving letters, all that stuff should be as much as possible included to mitigate any questions that IRCC might have about the genuineness of this work, right? It should be fine technically. Like if you've mentioned it before, right? It's not on your study permit, but it was on your postgrad work permit. That's good. At least it's mentioned somewhere. So yeah, just really try to prove it as best you can.
Yes, very good question from Joseph. I lost it already. Okay, here. So Joseph is asking, in relation to that, instead of employment verification letter, is it okay to show T4 or record of employment? And that obviously person refers to Canadian employment. So in Canada, we have T4 and record of employment as our tax documents.
Answer is no, unfortunately. You have to have an employment letter. Like it's one of IRCC's requirements. If you go to their, document checklists, go to their guides, it's in there. It's a properly done employment letter from your employer. And we've seen multiple, people come to us with refusals, even who had employment letters, but they were missing some factors, right? So if you're not going to provide any employment letter, that is a very high risk of refusal. I don't even think that they will look at your application and would just refuse it. You need to provide the job duties on an employment letter signed by the employer, right? I would be very scared to submit an application. Let's put it this way, I've never done it, and I probably never will submit an application without an employment verification letter.
Well, that would be not very good idea to do that. Yeah, no, it's definitely not advisable.
Not advisable.
Yes, I can tell you guys, I submitted one application in my practice, and I've been practicing for 9 years now, express entry specifically, focused on that. And back in 2017, I submitted the application without an employment letter. It was a huge package with all sorts of proof and affidavits and everything you need. Like there were hundreds of pages because I knew that I don't have employment letter. So I was trying to, do the best for the client. And that application was in process for 4 years. Okay, 4 years when the processing time should be about 5 to 6 months. And the reason why I was in process for 4 years because the government couldn't approve it without an employment letter, right? So in the end, it got approved. But is it, really good to have application in process for 4 years? No, but in the end, it got approved without employment letter. So yeah, that's a little story. And so after that, a great experience. I will never submit an application without an employment letter ever again, especially right now when they are scrutinizing all the applications.
Yeah, go back to that employer. I know sometimes people say like, well, they're not cooperative or whatever. You need to really just try to talk to that employer. If it's not HR, talk to your previous, like whoever your manager was. If sometimes people say the company doesn't exist anymore, well, you can still talk to whoever was the owner of the company. Do what you can, right? Or if the company does, if they're just not being cooperative, you really need to explain to them how important this really is. And often when people level with the former employer, they will budge, right? Eventually. And so
Yep.
hopefully you can convince them or somehow figure out how to get that letter properly done.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's see another question while we're waiting for Lisandra to join. I speak French and English and have experience. What program is the best for my situation?
So it's a francophone?
Yeah, French, bilingual person, French and English, and have more than 3 years of experience in a skilled profession.
Yeah, for sure. Create an express entry profile if you don't already have one. Do the French test, and you'll be in the French draws, hopefully. Depending on like all the factors, I don't know, age and etc. But for anybody out there who is saying like I'm a French speaker from X country, or I'm a French speaker and I'm in Canada or wherever you are, and you speak French, do what you need to create a profile in express entry. So, you need certain things, right? You need to have your education documents in there. If it's not Canadian, you need to have your credentials assessed as a Canadian equivalent, so ECA report. And you need to have your work experience in there, and you need to have your language test. So take a language test, get these things done if you are a French speaker, and create the profile in Express Entry. And there is a likely chance that you will get a draw, depending on your scores, depending on those outcomes. Um, you could potentially have never stepped foot in Canada and absolutely get an invitation to apply for permanent residence. As we said, 379 points is pretty low. So that's what we saw as a low for 2025. For 2026, the numbers are only going up. So we could potentially see even lower scores. So if anybody who's a francophone, if you speak French at a good level, absolutely, it's a very solid pathway to permanent residence. And if you don't know French, and you feel like learning it, and you can do so in the next, little while, and you have the ability, absolutely go learn French. It's an amazing option right now.
Yes, absolutely. Also, just to add, because I can see there are a lot of Francophone people attending this immigration summit. Guys, I know you think that this is how it's going to be forever, but no. The Canadian immigration changes faster than Canadian weather. It's like today is the sunshine, tomorrow is rain, and it's like 20 times a day. We have different weather, different situation, different, degrees, -10, +10. So if you're Francophone, this is your sign to do it right now, because maybe in 1 month, in 6 months, or 1 year from now, this will not be the situation anymore. And usually in my experience, I can see when the doors are open for certain group of people to apply for PR, and they're really open, like to the point that it's like the points are low and it's so easy, and it's 6 months and you get a PR and it's so easy. It just means that it's going to last for a very short period of time, most likely. So yeah, definitely, like we do have some signs that we're going to see some longevity to it, but you never know. Tomorrow the government changes, the conservatives come, and like everything changes.
I think a huge factor here is also Quebec, right? Themselves, the problem. We have a province who's a French-speaking province, and we can imagine that if they're taking a lot of, if so, the Francophone program is designed for people who are going to live outside of Quebec, right? These French draws, and if Quebec all of a sudden sees a huge influx of people coming that were supposed to be living outside Quebec, and then they just go to Quebec. Quebec could get involved and say, hey, like, we need to cut this program because all the people are just coming and we can't handle the influx of immigration. So there's all sorts of weird things could happen, just as a small example like that, that maybe they would pull back on the program. So yeah, that could, all those things, it's hard to predict what will happen. Yes, the plan right now is X, but the plan can pivot to Y tomorrow. Yeah.
Exactly. Immigration to Canada is a 99% based on politics, right? And political
Exactly.
agendas. And political agendas really dictate immigration. And we do have Quebec. And the whole purpose, by the way, of Express Entry is that if you're a Francophone and you're applying for Express Entry, you are saying that I don't want to settle in Quebec, because that's the whole purpose. Express Entry is for people outside of Quebec. It's for people who don't want to live in Quebec. Now, the reality, what Cory said, is that people who are Francophone, maybe they will use Express Entry as their option to immigrate, but they probably want to live in Montreal because it's a French-speaking city, right? And if Quebec will see this is happening, exactly like Cory said, then the French draws will stop very, very soon, because Quebec does not want that to happen. Yeah.
Have their own immigration pathways, which is separate from express entry. So yeah, they like to have the control of their own destiny, right? And if they see that people are using it as a backdoor to get in and to Quebec cities, yeah, for sure there could be some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Cory. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time. I know you have a busy day, and we're
My
going
pleasure.
to move on to our next speaker, Lisandra. Um, and Lisandra is we're going to completely switch gears here. I've seen a lot of people in the chat who are interested about spousal sponsorship. So Lisandra, we're super excited to hear about spousal sponsorship. How are you doing today? You're joining from Manitoba. Is it cold? Is it hot? Tell me.
It's almost always cold here. No, it is a little bit cold. Not too bad though. Like I think we're like maybe 5 or 10 degrees. That's what I checked this morning. But yeah, we need to enjoy this because later on it'll be very cold, like -30 or -25, who knows.
-30, yeah, sounds a bit too cold. Even though
Yeah.
we're in Ontario, so you know, it's pretty mild here, but still last winter it got like -20. So I just can't even imagine living in Manitoba. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, you can go ahead with the presentation, and we're going to talk all about spousal sponsorship.
All right. Elena, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's just loading now, so let's just wait a bit. It's not I can see it's trying to start, but it's not starting just yet.
Well, it seems to
Maybe you
be
can
up.
try again, like just kind of turn it off and try again, because oh yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's good.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Elena. So hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Lisandra Llamas. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant with ALEMA Canada Immigration. I am based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, hence the talk about, you know, the cold. And today I will be talking about spousal sponsorship, specifically about inland versus outland application. There are some areas of spousal sponsorship that I personally would not cover because other colleagues of mine who will be speaking in this summit will be talking about those areas. So please stay tuned for that because there is a lot to be unpacked about spousal sponsorship. So basically we'll be referring to which one, either inland or outland, which one gives you the best shot. But before we dive into which one is the best, we need to sort of like explain and understand a little bit more the spousal sponsorship. I'm not going to go into very, very, very specific details, but just kind of like give you the overview of this type of program. So when it comes to this presentation, we'll explain what is who can be sponsored and clarify the different classes for spousal sponsorship, the application processing times, and then we'll pretty much dive into inland versus outland application. So when we're talking about who can be sponsored, first of all, let me just clarify, because some of you already know this, but some of you might not know. When we're talking about spousal sponsorship, we're referring to a permanent resident of Canada or a Canadian citizen who wants to sponsor their spouse, common law partner, or conjugal partner for permanent residence. So you have to be in a relationship, in a genuine relationship. If you are the person being sponsored, you have to be in a genuine relationship with a Canadian citizen or a Canadian permanent resident. And for the sake of this program, there are different categories. So the first one and the most common one, I would say, is the spouse, meaning that they're both married. And when we're talking about marriage, we're referring to a marriage that is valid both in the jurisdiction where it took place, like if you got married outside Canada, and also under Canadian law. Now, one important thing that I usually like to mention as well is the fact that Canada does not recognize marriage by proxy. What I mean by this is when one or either of the members of this couple, this marriage, are not physically present in the ceremony. I know in some cultures this is very common and is legal, is normal, but Canada only recognizes if you are not, if your spouse is not a member of the Canadian Forces and could not be present at the ceremony because of his or her service responsibilities, then a marriage by proxy would not qualify. So you both have to be physically present, and the person that you are going to sponsor, and you as a sponsor as well, have to be at least must be at least 18 years of age. Now, when it comes to common law partner, we're referring to a marriage-like relationship, but there isn't a marriage certificate that has been issued because they have not got married yet. But they're living together. They have cohabitated at least either in the present or in the past. They have cohabitated for a minimum of 12 consecutive months. And if you have to demonstrate that, we're not talking about someone that I've lived with, sort of like, my roommate, and I'm like, okay, you're Canadian, help me, sponsor me. That's not the way it works. You do have to demonstrate that you are in a marriage-like relationship, that there is an interdependency, and that you're able to demonstrate that with the evidence that you will submit with your application. And now, in terms of conjugal partner, this is sort of like a special category because these people are in an interdependent relationship, but for some special circumstances, sometimes because of war or sometimes for other specific reasons, they're not able to either get married or live together. And so they need to apply it under this category. And I included the dependent children because if you do have dependent children, you can definitely include them in your application. And I mentioned that they need to be younger than 22 years old, but in some cases, very specific circumstances, your dependent child could be older than 22, but that's a very particular situation. I'm not going to get into that right now. So let's talk about, I think I jumped way ahead of my, my presentation here. See, I'm very excited. I guess I'm just pressing what I should not. Okay, so now, when it comes to the classes of application, there are 2 classes to apply to sponsor your spouse. The first one is family class, or you see outside Canada. Basically, this is an application that you are submitting, and it's going to be processed from it's going to be processed outside Canada. So that's why it's instead of saying family class, we often refer to the outside Canada application. And usually for this application, you should use this class. You should specify in your application that you're using this class when the person you want to sponsor lives outside Canada, or the person you want to sponsor is currently in Canada with their Canadian or permanent resident spouse, but they do not plan to stay in Canada throughout the process of this application. Perhaps they have family responsibilities outside Canada, or they have a job that requires them to travel outside Canada, or they just want to have the flexibility to travel. In those cases, you can apply using the outside Canada or family, using the family class. Now, I do have to clarify once again, because someone asked me this question once. Does that mean if I am here, if I am the sponsor, if I am in Canada and my spouse is, let's just say, for the sake of saying a country, in India, can I submit an inline application? And the answer is no. We're talking about the sponsor person. The spouse that's going to be sponsored, that's the one that either has to be inside or outside. We're basing the application on pretty much on them, because if they are applying using the spouse or common law partner in Canada class, it's not about me, the Canadian or permanent resident. It's about my spouse, if their spouse is here with me. Okay, so the family class is also used if you plan to appeal in case there is a rejection, because as we will see later on, the in Canada class does not have that privilege. And also, if you are applying as a conjugal partner, definitely you need to submit an application under the family class. Okay, that's the way this category pretty much applies. Now, when it comes to the in Canada class or spouse or common law partner in Canada, that's the inland application. As the word says it, your spouse is here. The person who's going to be sponsored is living with the Canadian or the permanent resident sponsored in Canada. They have to be physically in Canada, and they need to have a valid temporary resident status in Canada, or they must be exempt from needing a status under a public policy. And there is a public policy that came about in which individuals without valid temporary resident status, they can be sponsored in Canada, if only in cases where their inadmissibility falls under one of these categories that you can see on the screen. Perhaps they overstayed their visa or their visitor record or their work permit, the status that they had in Canada. They worked or studied without authorization. They entered Canada without the required visa or the documentation, or they entered Canada without a valid passport or travel document. But they have to ensure that they obtain these documents before permanent residence is granted. Okay. Now, the next one we'll be talking about the processing time. Now, processing time varies depending on the class of application that we use. If we're talking about spouse or common law partner living in Canada, and I'm going to be very specific, I'm referring to the sponsors who are outside Quebec, because Quebec has a processing time that's way longer. They have their own quota for this kind of applications. I personally, in my practice, just focus and I work with clients whose spouses, the Canadian citizen or the permanent resident, the sponsored, lives outside Quebec. And so in these cases, we're talking about roughly about 22 months. Now, this is pretty good now because a few months back, it was way higher. And it's just so sad. And quite frankly, my personal opinion is a little bit ridiculous that it takes that long. But again, think about it. They are in Canada with their spouse. They're already together. They have the opportunity to be working if they apply for a work permit. And so there isn't as much, I would say, urgency in processing these files. That's why it takes a little bit longer. But for those whose spouses are submitting their application through the family class, the outside Canada processing, the processing time actually takes a bit less because they're not processed in Canada. This application is processed outside Canada. And so depending on the processing office, some of them tend to be busier than others. So again, these processing times are pretty much estimates, and it really depends on the situation. I've seen and I've heard also some of my colleagues say that the applications that they submitted got approved in less than 6 months. So it depends. It pretty much depends, but this is the main guideline that we should follow in terms of how much time we should be expecting for our application to be processed and a decision would be made. Now, let's dive into the pros and cons of both types of classes, of both types of applications. So when we are talking about the outland sponsorship, the family class, first of all, the first thing that we just saw is that there is faster processing in some visa offices, like I mentioned before. There are some countries that have like a low backlog, and so it takes less time and is faster in those particular offices to get these applications processed and a decision, and approved in the majority of cases. Now, the second pro that this type of outline application has is the right of appeal. And I feel that this is kind of like the biggest reason as to why many people choose to go with the outline sponsorship, because in case something happens, in case the application is for some reason refused, they know they have the ability to appeal that decision to the Immigration Appeal Division. Okay, and in terms of what I was mentioning before, also it brings the flexibility of being able to leave Canada, to travel, and not being bound to stay inland. And this is actually one of the major differences as well, because a lot of people just want to have that flexibility, like I mentioned before, due to work, due to family responsibilities, and also because of their lifestyle as well. Now, when it comes to inland sponsorship, the sponsor person can apply for an open work permit once the application is submitted, allowing them to work while they wait. Now, I do have to make a pause here, and it's the fact that years ago, this was one of the biggest advantages of submitting an inland application. But now, if you submit an application outland, and then you are able to travel to Canada, maybe you come, maybe you have a visitor visa, or you can apply for an electronic travel authorization, or because you can just come and physically arrive to Canada. Once you are in Canada, then you can submit a work permit application if you want. This was not possible before, but since 2023, it was introduced, this policy that allows even applicants who submit an outline application, as long as they are already like physically in Canada, they can then submit an application for a work permit, presenting the acknowledge of receipt of their permanent residence or the spousal sponsorship application that was already submitted. Now, it also allows, the inland application allows couples to stay together in Canada during the processing time, which is great. Some people still decide to go use this stream because they have no rush. They don't need to go outside Canada. They just want to stay here, and that's totally fine. And in terms of like family dynamics, it allows for simpler communication, since both parties are in the same location. In terms of the cons, well, like we saw before, for outland sponsorship, the applicant cannot work in Canada unless they have they apply for a work permit, like I mentioned. Maybe they travel to Canada with a TRV, a temporary resident visa, and then they submit the application for open work permit with the AOR. But if they're not able to travel to Canada, they would have to stay outside Canada and wait for the whole process there. Okay, there is less contact with the sponsor during the processing time if they live apart. And I know that sometimes, it's kind of hard for people, for couples to just wait for that long, but it depends on your particular situation. If you're outside Canada and you cannot travel, well, what else can you do? So in terms of inland application, if you are in Canada and you submit an inland sponsorship application, it is not recommended that you leave Canada. Honestly, that's one of the major drawbacks, because if anything happens and you leave the country, you might not be able to re-enter Canada. The officer at the border has the discretionary power to decide whether you are allowed back in or not. And if you're not allowed into Canada, then you would have to start all over again. So that's in some cases, when there is like a very extraordinary circumstances, like there was an emergency. For example, one of my friends applied. They were in the middle of the sponsorship process. It was an inland sponsorship, but there was a sudden death in the family, And like she had to be there. Her father had died, and she had to be there to make all of the arrangements. And well, on the way back, she brought all of the documents to prove the reasons as to why she traveled. This was not a leisure trip. It was just an emergency. It was like a force majeure, like something that was outside of her control. And she was able to explain that at the border. The CBSA officer at first just kind of like, before she explained, the attitude was more like, I'm not going to let you in. But as soon as she started explaining, you know, they also are human beings and they have a heart. And so the officer understood the reasons and used his discretionary power to allow her in. But I definitely do not recommend that if you're in the middle of an application. I mean, we have to talk about what specific circumstances you're going through. And the other thing is, obviously, like I mentioned before, inland sponsorship does not have the right to appeal in case the application is refused. So you will have to reapply, pay new fees, start all over again, resubmit your application from scratch. And the processing time can definitely be slower. These are the pros and cons of this type of application. Now, let's answer the $1,000,000 question. Which one is right for you? Well, the answer is, it depends. It will depend on your particular situation. It would depend on what you and your spouse have discussed. Obviously, like I said, if your spouse is in Nigeria and your spouse doesn't have a visitor visa, he or she has never traveled to Canada, obviously you have to submit a family class application. But if your spouse is already in Canada with you, then you need to discuss what class are we going to apply under. And remember, when you're submitting your application, you have to specify which class you want to use to submit your application. So I encourage you to sit down and to have that conversation with your spouse, analyze the pros and cons, just weigh all the facts, and then make your decision based on that. Both classes have their advantages and they both have their trade-offs. So this is something that has to be considered as a couple, as a family unit, and just decided based on your particular family situation. As you saw before, pretty much the main features when it comes to both applications, the applicant's location. And when we're talking about the applicant, remember, we're referring to the person who's going to be sponsored for permanent residence. The applicant for the Outland Canada, for the Outland application or the family class can be outside Canada or can be inside Canada. In terms of inland application, it's compulsory that the applicant is in Canada. The applicant must be in Canada. In terms of work authorization, unless the applicant applies for a work permit, they will not be able to work. And the inland application, yes, you have that option as well to submit your application for the open work permit. Travel flexibility, yes for outland, limited or pretty much null for inland, and right of appeal, no right of appeal for the inland. But if you apply for under family class, then you do have that right of appeal. The processing time, they vary, but often the outland application is processed faster. And in terms of the requirements, are you required to stay and live with your spouse and common law partner in Canada while the application is processed? If you apply under family class, there is no requirement. But if you apply under spouse or common law partner in Canada class, then yes, you are required to stay in Canada with your Canadian spouse or permanent resident spouse or common law partner. Okay. Now, that brings me to the takeaways of this presentation. Pretty much there is no size fits all answer. As I mentioned before, there isn't better or worse. To be honest, now If you have the opportunity to submit your application under family class, it kind of like makes a little bit more sense considering the processing times and all of the advantages that this type of application provides. But again, there are still some people who decide to submit their inline application. That's totally fine. It's just a matter of preference and a matter of personal situation. Now, the best choice will depend on your unique situation, like I said, the circumstances of the sponsor and the circumstances of the applicant as well. And if you feel like you're not sure or you kind of like need a little bit more guidance, feel free to reach out to an immigration professional, either a licensed immigration consultant or an immigration lawyer. An immigration consultant can support you in choosing the best option that will give you and will give you your family the best chance for success. There are many immigration consultants in this summit that specialize in spousal sponsorship. So make sure that you take our information, and if at some point you feel like you need that bit of help, we will be more than happy to assist you with that. And I believe that brings me to the questions before my final slide.
Thank you so much, Lisandra. It was great. I even took some screenshots for myself. I really liked the table of like inland versus outland sponsorship. I even sent it to Cory because I'm like, this is a very handy. We should print it out and put it somewhere. Very
it helps,
good.
right? When you look at it, it's like, oh, it helps the person make more sense of the information. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's confusing. All right, I actually saw a very interesting question, so I'm wondering what you would comment on that one. So we have Velarde, who applied for spousal sponsorship March 2024, but until now, they haven't received AOR. Their last update is biometrics.
Did you say outside Canada or inland?
We don't know.
That is very strange. That's very strange. And I would definitely, if I were you, I would communicate with IRCC, maybe send a web form. I'm just wondering if, I'm assuming they did not receive an AOR. If did they get an AOR, they should have probably received at least that, like, because the AOR is received once the application reaches the completion stage.
Yep.
Like, if your application is complete, it's not missing any documents, you should have received the acknowledge of receipt. That's kind of like the first step in the timeline of processing. So that's very, very strange. I would recommend one of the two following things. One, either send a web form to IRCC to inquire what's happening, or just try to call. I know trying to call can be difficult. Sometimes you don't get a hold of anybody there, but at least you need the AOR so that you can have your application number and everything. Or book a consultation with a professional so that you can go over what could be actually happening, because with that minimal information, it's very difficult to tell what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, do you see any questions? You want to see the chat for questions? Maybe you will like any of them?
Let me see if, because I don't, I'm not seeing the questions here. Hold on, let me, oh. Sorry, Elena, I'm just opening the chat right now. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't take your time.
Someone says here, I'm in Canada on a spousal open work permit. Can I say, oh no, that's another question. How does getting pregnant after submitting your sponsorship affect the outland sponsorship? Oh, so how does getting pregnant affect, after submitting your sponsorship, affect the outland sponsorship? If there is any major life event during your application, the main thing that you have to do is just update IRCC. Send them an update so that they know what's happening. your file will get updated, and your child can be considered in this application. So basically, this is a question that it would be nice to review during a consultation as well, but you would definitely have to update IRCC of any major changes that you're undergoing. Can we apply for spousal sponsorship if you are in temporary work permit and spouse is outside Canada? I'm not really understanding this question. What do you mean that you are in temporary work permit? If you are a temporary foreign worker in Canada, you cannot sponsor your spouse under the spousal sponsorship program. The spousal sponsorship program is only for permanent residents and Canadian citizens who want to sponsor their spouses for permanent residents. Now, there is another kind of sponsorship, like the temporary sponsorship, and that applies to foreign workers, for example, or international students in some cases. It applies to some foreign workers who have a specific type of job offer. They might be able to sponsor temporarily their spouse so that the spouse can apply also for a work permit, but that's not what we've been covering in this presentation. So if you have a work visa, you are in Canada as a worker, and you want to see or explore whether you can bring your spouse to Canada, I recommend you book a consultation with one of the consultants here, because that's a completely separate program. Can you please share the email and number of immigration office in Canada? You can definitely Google it. If you go to Google and you put IRCC number, it'll pop up. You'll be able to find it there and call their call center. I'm not sure. I'm assuming this question is for me. Do you speak French? Un petit peu. Je parle un petit français. My French is not that great. My colleague Laurence is here. She'll be presenting. I'm not sure if she's presenting today or tomorrow. Her first language is French. I do speak Spanish. If there is any Spanish speaker out there who's wanting to have a consultation or services in Spanish, I would be more than happy to do that for them. But I don't trust the quality of my French to do a consultation in French. Sorry, sorry. I wish I felt so confident to speak in French during a consultation. And I don't see any other question that is relevant to what I just presented. Oh, what happens if you do not have proof apart from the lease? Oh, so this question for the spousal sponsorship, what happens if you do not have any joint proof apart from the lease? I am not going to answer that question right now because another colleague of mine will be presenting exactly on this specific topic, like how to demonstrate the genuineness of the relationship. So I don't want to step my toes on, her topic. So please stay tuned and stay because I believe it's Lori, right?
Yes, it's Lori, and I'm just looking it up when she will be presenting. I believe that would be tomorrow, but let me double check. So yeah, everybody who finds spousal sponsorship as a good topic for them, then I just want to let you know that tomorrow Lori will be our second speaker, and she will be talking about spousal sponsorship as well. And that's more going to be towards how do you actually prove your relationships? How do you write your relationship letter?
Yes, so definitely wait for that presentation. It's a very good question, but I can't answer it because Lori will be talking about that. And before I finish my presentation, I do want to, I'm assuming you're not seeing my slide, so I'm just going to share my slide again, just to show you what we can do for you at ALEMA Canada Immigration, what kind of services I personally provide. Give me a second, please. And sorry, Olena, you can't see my screen.
I can see it, but right now it's white for some reason. I can see questions. Yeah, now I can see Canva and questions.
Oh, okay. Oh, my bad. Okay.
You can maybe stop sharing and reshare it.
All right. Can you see it now?
Yeah, just make it bigger if you can. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just loading.
Okay, perfect. Oh, there is a QR code. I love QR codes.
Yeah. So just going back to what I said before, if at some point, like all of these questions that you guys have shared, they're very good questions. Some of them, like I said, will be answered as this summit goes on, because many of our presenters will be talking about spousal sponsorship. Some of my amazing colleagues will be talking about, you know, the spousal sponsorship open work permit. So stay tuned for that. But if at some point after this summit, you realize, you know what, I better just sit down with a professional. I just want to ask, you know, pointing questions. If you need help, I just want to clarify that at ALEMA Canada Immigration, myself, Lisandra Llamas, as the lead consultant, we provide consultation services, and we also provide full application representation services. And we specifically focus on spousal sponsorship applications, PMP, MPMP, which is a Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program, also express entry, and some temporary resident visa services. So if you need assistance, feel free to reach out. And for those of you who are particularly considering professional services for the spousal sponsorship process, feel free to scan this QR code. This will bring you directly to the booking page for spousal sponsorship consultation specifically. If you're looking for any other type of consultation, I believe that at the end of this summit, Olena will be sharing all of our booking pages, so you can then decide if you need additional services that are not spousal sponsorship related. I feel free to book a separate consultation for that. But that's all for me today. Thank you so much to all of you.
Lisandra, just before you go, I just see some very good question popped in. Do you mind answering that one? It's
Absolutely,
from Seema.
absolutely.
Sorry to like kind of catching you off guard, but I just feel like it's pretty good question.
Sure, no problem.
So I can, yeah, you can see it.
Sorry, can you, I'm not seeing the question.
Yeah, that's okay. I can just read it to you. So Seema is asking, so what if your Canadian spouse lives outside of Canada, right? Can they sponsor as a Canadian spouse outside of Canada? Can they sponsor?
Well, we have to define what she means by Canadian spouse. If you're talking about a Canadian citizen, then the answer is yes. If the Canadian citizen spouse is outside Canada with you, you can start your sponsorship process. However, in your application, you will have to submit evidence of the intention to come back and relocate to Canada once the permanent residence or the application is approved. If your Canadian spouse is not a Canadian citizen, but a permanent resident of Canada, the answer will be no. The permanent resident of Canada doesn't have the, I would say that that flexibility of submitting the application while they are physically outside Canada. They have to be physically in Canadian territory when the application is submitted. So yeah, you have to clarify that nuance. Are we talking about a Canadian citizen, or are we talking about a permanent resident? And there you have your answer.
Yes. Thank you so much for this one. It's just I've seen this question coming so many times recently, because what I think is happening is that, you know, we had a lot of permanent residents who got their PRs in the last 5 years, and some of them just moved back to their own countries, right? And now they're trying to sponsor their spouse, and we see it a lot. So I just wanted to make sure we cover that question as well.
Oh, I see that she just clarified that, yes, he is a Canadian citizen. Okay, then you're good. Just make sure that you prove that he'll be in Canada when your application gets approved.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Lisandra. It was really nice having you here. And by the way, guys, if you have more questions to Lisandra or any other of our speakers, on day 3, we're going to have our panel, all the speakers responding to your questions. So end of the day 3 of our Immigration Summit, we're going to take as many questions as we can to answer. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Elena. Everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Whoa, I'm on the big screen. Okay, so we are going to go ahead with our next speaker who will be joining us shortly. And her name is Diandra. And Diandra is, of course, regulated Canadian immigration consultant, and she will be talking all about Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, so Ontario PNP, but specifically employer job offer streams. So Ontario PNP employer job offer streams will be covered today by Diandra. I can see she's already joining. And yeah, so if you are interested, hi Diandra. If you're interested in Ontario PNP, Diandra is your RCIC to ask questions. How are you doing today, Diandra?
I am good. I'm actually excited for sweater weather. I
Oh,
came back from my vacation from the warm weather, and I was like, the chill in the air is nice. Fall is my favorite season in Canada, so I'm
I
wearing
know.
my
Well,
sweater
get
today.
ready for the 6 months of this, okay?
I actually prefer being cold, and that's crazy coming from somebody from the Bahamas, right? But when you're cold, you can warm up. When you're hot, you're just baking in your own sweat.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I love Canada, but fall is my favorite season. Winter gets tedious, but fall is just that wonderful in between for
Yeah.
summer and winter. I love
I
it.
love it. I come from Ukraine, which is the weather is pretty much the same as in Canada, but I love hot weather. I should be living in Bahamas. I should be living in Bahamas.
We can switch. We can switch.
All right. So, welcome, Diandra. Yay. All right. So, let's go ahead with your presentation. I'm excited to see what Ontario PNP got in store for us when it comes to employer job offer streams.
Yes, amazing. So, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to join you today. I'm Diandra from Harbour Cave Immigration Consulting, and I'm super happy to be here at the Fall Immigration Summit to talk to you guys about one of my most recent favorite topics, which is the OINP Employer Job Offer category. So, if you're here and you're wondering how or if a job offer in Ontario can lead you to PR, that's what this session is for. This session is for you. So tune in. And as Elena knows, I go down the rabbit hole really quickly. So I try to condense everything to give you guys the main points. But at the end of the presentation, I'll give you ways to contact me if you have any more in-depth questions. So just stay tuned for that. So with that, we'll just dive in. Oops, there we go. So I'll do a quick introduction of myself. As I said, my name is
wait, Diandra, you're sharing slides?
Oh, shoot. My screen didn't share. Sorry, guys. Tech issues, right?
I've been all morning in tech. It's stressing me out, all the tech stuff. Okay, we're good now. We can see your slides.
Amazing. Okay, let me just make sure I can see you too, in case you're giving me any cues. Perfect. You can see the full screen slide, eh? Okay.
Yeah, all good, all good.
Wonderful. So I'll start with a quick introduction of myself. As I mentioned, my name is Diandra Whymms. I am an immigrant to Canada. I came to Canada in 2005 as an international student from the Bahamas. And every Canadian I meet asks me, what the heck are you doing here? But I beg to differ. It's a beautiful thing to have two countries to call home, and I'm proud that Canada and the Bahamas are the two. I graduated, and in 2010, I moved from student to a post-grad work permit. And then in 2014, I gained my permanent residency. And following that in 2022, I gained my citizenship. And during all of those processes, I heard so many stories about people being scammed, people being taken advantage of. And I had so many people contacting me from my home country asking for help because their kids were coming to school or they were trying to come over and everything. And I got interested in in Canadian immigration. And so in 2023, I went through the education program to become a licensed Canadian immigration professional. And in 2024, I started Harbour Cave Immigration. So today I'm a fully licensed RCIC in good standing with the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And I say that just to remind you guys to make sure that if you're using any help, that it is from an authorized practitioner, a licensed consultant. And you can always find out if your consultant is licensed by going to the directory of RCICs at the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll dive in. Today, we're going to have a brief introduction about what OINP is. We'll talk about the employer job offer category. We'll talk about the employer requirements because these are employer-driven streams. We'll talk about the different streams under the employer job offer category, eligibility requirements for each stream, and then I'll go into talking about some common mistakes that people make and how to avoid them. And then we'll wrap up and leave some room for you guys to ask questions. So the first thing is, what is the OINP? So the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is Ontario's provincial immigration program. It's jointly managed through the Ontario government and IRCC, and it helps Ontario employers specifically to hire and retain international talent. So there are a couple of different ways you can apply to OINP. Two categories: through express entry streams or non-express entry streams or expression of interest streams. So the employer job offer is an expression, employer job offer category is an expression of interest stream. As I mentioned, the employer job offer category is employer driven. And in fact, since the changes on July 2nd of this year, the employer has to initiate this process. So as you'll see as I go through the presentation, you have to really work closely with your employer if this is the way that you are going to try to get your PR. There's 3 streams under this category: the foreign worker stream, the international student stream, and in-demand skills stream. And before we get into those 3 streams, what I want to talk about is the employer requirements, because it's not just enough to have your employer support. Your employer also needs to have certain things in place to be able to support you. And some of them are these. So the employer has to be actively in business for 3 or more years before submitting an application for an approval of your employer for your job offer. They have to have a minimum revenue requirement. So that means in revenue and income, that employer has to make at least 1 million if they're located in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, or if they're outside the Greater Toronto area, the minimum revenue requirement is 500,000 in the most recent fiscal year or tax year. They also have to be compliant, so they can't have any outstanding orders under the Ontario Employment Standards Act, and that just governs how employees are treated by their employer in essence. And they can't have any outstanding orders under the Health and Safety Act either. They have to have a physical premises in Ontario that you report to work to. And in general, they just have to meet certain financial thresholds, size requirements. So they have to prove that the job offer that they're providing you is full-time and permanent, not seasonal, not temporary. And one of the things that people tend to overlook in this employer requirements is that the wage, so the amount that they're offering to pay you for the job offer, it has to meet or exceed the average for that occupation. So if you're a painter in Ontario, in Sudbury, Ontario, let's say, the wage has to meet the average wage for painters in Sudbury, Ontario, or that region. So a lot of employers get that wrong, and sometimes they have to make a change, or the applicant isn't eligible based on what they're being paid by the employer. So these are all things as the applicant, as the person looking for PR, that you really have to be aware of. You have to know what is required from your employer so that you know that they meet every requirement to support you in your immigration application. And it's really important that they meet these requirements because you can't even register an expression of interest until your employer submits a job offer, meeting these requirements through the OINP employer portal. So now that we have a bit of an overview of what's required from your employer, we can talk about the 3 streams that I mentioned before. So our 3 streams, again, foreign worker, international student, and in-demand skills. I did a little table, like Lisandra and Olena pointed out. Tables are such a nice way to simplify information, right? So this is just a quick overview of each stream, who it's ideally for, the work experience required, and the knock level that they're looking for applicants in these streams. So as you can see, the foreign worker stream is for experienced professionals with at least 2 years of work experience in tier 0 to 3 employment. International students do not require, there's no mandatory work experience requirement. The requirement is mostly surrounding education from a Canadian eligible institution. So you have to be a recent grad from a Canadian institution that's eligible, and the knock level would be tier 0 to 3. And in-demand skills, you have to have at least 9 months in Ontario, and it's usually in tier 4 to 5 jobs. So this stream is for workers in essential sectors like healthcare, construction, manufacturing, agriculture. And it's very specific. There's a whole list of occupations that are eligible for the in-demand skills stream. And again, once we are finished with our summit, you'll have access to these slides. So I put a little link here at the bottom that shows you where to go to find that list of eligible occupations for this specific stream. In the foreign worker stream, we're going to get into just some general eligibility requirements. So in foreign worker stream, you have to have a registered expression of interest and then an invitation to apply to be eligible. You have to have at least 2 years of full-time work experience or the equivalent in part-time. You have to have a valid license or authorization. So that means if your occupation is in an industry where you have to be licensed to perform that job, you need to have a valid license in the province of Ontario. And the biggest thing, and you'll see this across all of the streams, you have to have an intention to live in Ontario, and they're going to ask you for proof of that, right? So you'll have to provide things like maybe a rental or lease agreement, purchase of property or something like that to prove that you actually intend to settle down and live in Ontario long term. Reminder, and that's a great reminder that I know some people kind of look at these PNP programs, especially now, with express entry becoming so hard to break the seal on. People are looking at PNPs as an alternative strategy, and in the back of their minds, they're probably thinking, oh, well, I'll just go and live there, and then I'll just go and apply under this. I'll live there for a little bit and then move. Ontario is actually checking to see if you have a long-term intention to reside. So it really is important to think about where it is you want to live if you're going to apply through a PNP. That's my 2 cents on that. And finally, for foreign worker stream, you have to have legal status if it's applicable. So if you are here under a work permit, you have to make sure that it's a valid work permit and you maintain status. So a bit similar to express entry, when OINP looks at these streams, they are putting you in a group based on scoring factors. And so I listed out some of the scoring factors they look at for the foreign worker stream. So they look at the tier category for your job offer. They look at your broad occupational category. They look at the wage. As I mentioned earlier, the wage has to meet or exceed the median wage for that occupation in the area that you're going to be working in Ontario. They score based on your work permit status. Are you here working already under a valid work permit? Are you abroad with no work permit? They're looking at that as a scoring factor. They're looking at the tenure of your job. So how long have you been with the employer that is offering you the job? And as we know from the eligibility requirements, you have to have at least 2 years of experience. They're looking at your language skills. So not only your ability, which is your CLB level, but they're also looking at your knowledge, right? Just the fact that you took a language test. And when you get to the application stage, they will be looking at your earnings history for Canadian work experience. So if you are here and have been working, they're looking at your notices of assessment from the Canada Revenue Agency to see if you're making enough over the last few years to qualify for this stream. And finally, this is a really overlooked one, I find. People do not think about regionalization too much, right? A lot of people are applying from the GTA area, and as we know, it is very populated already. So there are more points given when you're outside of the GTA and when you're outside of the GTA in general, and also if you're just outside of Toronto or outside of the city of Toronto, you get more points for that. So that is an interesting thing to look at as well, because the last few OINP draws have been targeted at specific regions outside of Toronto and the GTA. So that is a very important factor to look at and make sure that you that if you do qualify for the regionalization scores, that you make sure that you enter that in your expression of interest and get the points for that. So next we look at the international student stream. Again, similar to the foreign worker stream, you have to have an expression of interest and then an invitation to apply. This one is different because there's no work experience requirement, but you have to have education from an eligible Canadian institution. Again, a valid license if it applies to your work. An intention to live in Ontario. Again, you're going to see that across all the streams. Legal status if it's applicable. So they're looking at your work or study permit status. And special to this one is that you have to your application has to be submitted within 2 years of completing your education. So it's possible for some people that they can register an expression of interest under the international student stream, but maybe they've been waiting, and that during that wait, the 2 years is up, which means that they would have to register an expression of interest under another stream, right? They wouldn't be eligible for this international student stream anymore. I actually just had a recent consultation with somebody that's coming up on that 2-year mark and would have to switch if they do not get an invitation to apply by then. So that's something to keep in mind about the international student stream. And just like the foreign worker stream, I did a quick summary of all the scoring factors that they look at for international student stream. You'll see some similar ones. And then the specific one for the international student stream here is education. So they're looking at what's your highest level of education. Have you gotten a bachelor's? Have you gotten a master's, etc.? What field of study have you been in? And your Canadian education experience. So that would be the difference between the scoring factors for this and the foreign worker stream. But all of the other ones are similar. And the other difference here is that in regionalization factors, they look at your location of study as well as the location of the job offer. So they look at where your job is, but they also look at where you completed your studies. So that's an interesting one that's specific to the international student stream. So next we'll look at eligibility requirements for the in-demand skills stream. Again, similar, you need to have an expression of interest. Are you seeing the commonalities here? And an ITA. The difference here with work experience is that you have to have a minimum of 9 months work experience in that in-demand field. Again, a valid license if you need it. You have to have CLB4 or higher in either official language. Your education is being looked at here as well, either Canadian education or foreign education backed by an educational credential assessment. Again, intention to live in Ontario, they are going to look at that. They want people to come and stay. So they're going to look at that factor across all these streams. And again, legal status. And once again, we'll look at the scoring factors for in-demand skills stream. Very similar to foreign worker and international student. We are looking at the tier category, work and study permit status, location of the job offer, earnings history, etc. Oops, I think one of my one of my, there we go. So I wanted to next talk about how the application process looks. With the expression of interest streams, with the employer job offer streams, the application starts with the job offer. Again, I'm mentioning that because the employer drives this process. You can't do anything until that employer submits a job offer through the OINP employer portal. That is why it's really, really important to work closely with your employer. You are going to need either yourself or somebody to advocate for you because I think Cory mentioned it in his session. It is, excuse me, it's really crucial that employers understand the importance of their role in the immigration process. They will have to provide you that job offer letter. They will have to provide you copies of your contract, all of those things. And especially for employer job offer category streams, they drive the entire process. You can't do anything until they start the process. So again, the process starts with the job offer. Your employer goes to the OINP employer portal and submits the job offer. Once they've done that, it will generate a job offer number. They give that to you, and then you initiate the second stage of the process, which is registering your expression of interest. After the employer submits the job offer, you have 30 calendar days. It's important to note calendar, not business days, to submit your expression of interest. Once you submit your expression of interest, so they will ask you about all of those scoring factors that we talked about a few minutes ago. They'll ask you about your language skills. All of the job offer portions will already have been filled out by your employer. So things like the wage, the knock, the tier category, the employer will already have filled that out in the job offer, and those will be pre-populated when you enter that job offer number in your expression of interest. So you don't have to fill those out. The employer fills that out in the job offer, and it pre-populates inside your expression of interest, and it can't be changed. The employer would have to do a whole new job offer to change all of those things. So again, second stage of the process, you have 30 calendar days after your employer submits the job offer and gives you that job offer number. You need to submit the expression of interest, or you'll have to start all over again. Once you enter all of your information, you'll receive a score based on the scoring factors for your particular stream. And then once you submit that, you're basically just waiting for an invitation to apply. So OINP holds periodic draws, and if you meet all the requirements of the draw, you'll receive an ITA. And once you reach the application stage, that's where you have to prove what you said in the expression of interest, right? So in the expression of interest, you talk to them about your language ability, about your education, all of that stuff. And you're entering details, but you're not uploading documents. The application stage is where you have to provide supporting documents to prove that you meet those requirements and that everything that you said in the expression of interest is true. So it's very similar to express entry in that way, where you're creating your profile and then you have to prove what's in your profile, right? In the next stage of the application process, once you've submitted your application, then it's in queue for processing. The OINP will then make a decision. If it's approved, then you receive a nomination approval and certificate, and you can then submit your application for permanent residency to IRCC. And finally, once you've submitted the application to IRCC, IRCC makes a decision whether you've been approved or not for PR. I wanted to actually give you guys a quick story because I love stories. I love giving clarity on immigration through stories. So this one is actually about a client of mine that I recently had a consultation, and then they hired me to work on their immigration case. So he is a painter that works in Toronto and has been waiting for a very long time, has had tons of Canadian experience, almost 8 years, let's say. I think it's about 8 years, yes. And has been waiting for the opportunity for PR for a long time, gone through a lot of ups and downs, and finally found a job with an employer that was willing to support him for OINP. So he asked me to step in, and I worked really, really closely with his employer to make sure that every single thing that we need is done and done correctly. And he recently got an invitation to apply. And I can't tell you how much I still get the warm fuzzies when you get that approval, that next step in the process. And he was so happy. His family was so happy. They've been waiting for the opportunity for so long. So I just tell you that story to say that there is an opportunity. It's not all just based on regions. He works in the Toronto area and got an invitation to apply. And I always say to lead with hope, right? Um, so I wanted to share that story with you just to let you know that there is movement in OINP. We had a long break, and hoping with the plans, the immigration plans that come out today, the provinces get a little bit more wiggle room on how many they can invite. But there we go. That's a success story with OINP. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is common mistakes. I can't tell you how often applications get refused over completely avoidable mistakes. So in OINP, in these employer job offer streams, one of the things that commonly happens is that people are not making sure that the wages meet the average or over the average for the specific knock. So a lot of people get confused about that requirement. You actually have to go and look for the knock and the region. You can't just look for the region and say, oh, the average wage is this in Toronto. You have to look for the average wage of a carpenter in the Toronto area, carpenter in Sudbury area. You have to make sure that that matches up. A lot of people do one or the other, and it doesn't work out, right? So a lot of people end up in a bind because they haven't verified that, and they don't realize, right? They get confused about the requirement. Mismatched details between what the employer submits and what you have submitted. Using an incorrect knock, that's a big one, right? The employer's requirements can't be met, or they can't be proven. So the employer, you think that they meet all the requirements, but they don't have supporting documents to back it up. Maybe they're behind on their filing with CRA. That is one of the things that could hold up your application, because they have to be up to date with their tax filings to prove that they meet the revenue requirements in the tax year before they submit your application. Another big one is missing documents. Everything that you put in that expression of interest, you need to have a document to back it up. Do not miss this one. And I think Cory mentioned it earlier as well with the employment letters. Same thing with OINP. That job offer letter has to meet the requirements. They tell you exactly what they need to see in the job offer letter, and you need to make sure that your employer hits every one of those points. So again, that is one of the things that applicants get kind of messed up on, that they don't follow what their employer is doing closely in this process. Again, without those changes that were made on July 2nd, it's crucial to work alongside your employer and make sure all of the requirements are met, and make sure that everything in the job offer letter that you need is in there. And finally, a really common mistake, OINP moves fast. Missed deadlines are one. I can't tell you how many people I've seen have reached out to me almost in tears about missing a deadline. OINP moves very fast. You might be waiting a while to see an invitation to apply, but once that invitation comes in, you only have a very small window, 17 calendar days to submit your application, a complete, accurate application. And within that 17 calendar days, your employer has 14 calendar days to submit an approval for your job offer. So again, the whole process, your employer is going to be involved the entire time. So you have to be careful of deadlines, know your deadlines. And I will wrap it up Sorry, we're going back. There you go. I want to wrap it up and then open the floor for questions. And I like to start with a little bit of a quote. Fear is not a strategy, preparation is. Again, I mentioned this before, but lead with hope and do the hard work. It is not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be an instant PR. There is a lot. This is a long process. There's a lot of steps, and you need to be prepared. So a couple of the tips to prepare is know your stream, understand the rules and requirements of that stream, have a solid plan. So I mentioned earlier that I had a consultation with someone qualified for the international student stream, but he's right on the cusp of that 2 years after completing his education. So we actually talked about a strategy of applying under another, like making sure that he meets the requirements and applying under another stream if he doesn't get an invitation to apply under the international student stream before that 2 years is up. The second thing, verify your employer's eligibility. So again, the revenue requirements is one that trips up a lot of people. They think that they have their employer's full support, but the employer doesn't quite have the revenue amount to justify to be able to support them. So make sure you talk over what is needed with your employer and ask the relevant questions. Make sure that they're eligible before you get too deep into the process. Because if they're not and they can't prove that they're eligible, you'll be back at square one. And I mentioned this a couple of times, but the third thing is work closely with your employer throughout the process. The employer initiates the process. You'll need them again when you get the invitation to apply. You have to work alongside your employer throughout the process. So, build that rapport with your HR or whoever's going to be handling the employer portion of the process, because you are going to need them, and you're going to need to be able to understand exactly what you need from them so you can make sure that they're submitting the correct things and don't do anything to jeopardize your application inadvertently. The fourth thing is to submit a complete, accurate expression of interest. And if you're invited, a complete accurate application. And this is one that I have found in my practice. Gathering documents in that first stage and that expression of interest stage makes the application stage much easier. So just gathering everything that you'll need to submit for the application during the expression of interest stage, even though in expression of interest stage, you don't need to upload any documents or anything, except for, you don't need to upload anything, but you do need to have a valid language test and ECA, and you'll need details from that. So you'll have to have the document in front of you to do the expression of interest. But gathering all of the other supporting documents at that first stage makes it much easier and to do the application once you get an ITA. And remember, the timelines are quick, which leads me to the second point of knowing your deadlines. Once you get an ITA, you only have 17 calendar days, not business days, calendar days. So weekends count. You only have those 17 calendar days to submit. Do not miss your deadline. You will have to start all over again, and there's no guarantees. We know that with Canadian immigration. So know your deadlines. Stay on top of your employer with their deadlines as well, because again, within that 17 calendar days, your employer has 14 calendar days to submit the approval for your job offer. And finally, just as with everything, triple check everything. Double, triple check, quadruple check if you want to. Just make sure that everything that you have submitted in your expression of interest has a supporting document to go with it. Make sure that your job offer letter meets all of the requirements that OINP has set out, and ask for help if you're not sure. If you need to have a consultation with a licensed professional like myself or any of the RCICs that will be presenting to you over the next couple of days, please reach out for help if you're unsure. It's better to talk to a professional than to submit something where you weren't unsure and get rejected for a small thing that could have been avoided if you had a professional set of eyes to look at it. And if you like hearing immigration stories, if you like learning about Canadian immigration through stories, myself and one of the presenters that are coming to you on day 3, Barbara, We are both RCICs, and we have a podcast that we host on Spotify and YouTube. You can check us out at Canada Unpacked Podcast and get your immigration insights from there. I'll open things up to questions. I want to thank you all for listening and joining us today. I'll open the floor for questions, and I've got a QR code here for 20% off our 60-minute consultation sessions at Harbour Cave. You can use the promo code SUMMIT to take advantage of that. And of course, follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Follow us on all or any platforms, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Diandra. That was great. Are you okay going through the chat and seeing which questions would you like to take?
Yes, let me just grab the chat window. There we go. Oh, I see one already. For foreign worker stream, do I require police clearance certificate from home country? So not in the OINP application stage. You will require it for the PR stage though. When you're that is Manju is asking. In the PR stage, when you're applying to IRCC for the permanent residency, you'll need the police clearance certificate then. That's a great question. Let me see. There's so many. They're coming in as quicker than I can read them. I get this one a lot too. Jesus says, do you work with employers helping them to find foreign workers? I do not. We do not have recruitment services, but there are recruitment services out there. I'll remind everyone that if you're using anything like that, to make sure it's legitimate and that you are working with people that are not just trying to grab your money and don't do anything for you. As a hairstylist, Kudirat is asking, as a hairstylist, can I apply to OINP? I don't know if my profession is in demand and where in Ontario is best for my profession. So I don't know about hairstylist specifically, but again, if you're looking at the in-demand skills stream, that I don't believe that was on the list. Again, once we are done for the day, if you're registered, you will get copies of the slides, and I do have the link where you can look at the list of eligible NOCs and occupations for in-demand skills. And in general, again, if you take a look at the scoring factors for each of the streams, anything outside the GTA will get you a little bit, will get you more points. So to answer your question about where in Ontario is best, not just for a hairstylist, but in general, it's a little bit better. It'll boost your score if you're outside of the GTA. There's another one, Kudirat, I think, is OINP for people living in Canada already. So technically, no, it is not. It can be for people living abroad as well. But as Cory mentioned when he was talking about express entry, same thing for OINP. What's happening right now is that they are, because their allocation for the province is low at the moment, most provinces will be targeting people that are already living in Canada and working in Canada. So that's something to take into account. That they'll be looking at sending invitations to people who are already here as a priority, because they don't have much room to invite applicants. Tupe asks, how do you show your intention to live in Ontario? That is a great question. And one, they have a list of documents that you can use to prove your intention to reside. So like I mentioned in the presentation, you can provide rent or lease documents. You can provide documents about the purchase of property. There's a whole list of documents, and I can add that to the resources that will come after the the presentation, but it is also a great space to add as much information as you can, because it is a big factor that they're looking at. Are you actually going to remain in Ontario for a long period of time? So more is better with that one. Make sure that you can provide a lot of supporting documents to show them that, hey, my intention is to live here long term. For instance, one of my clients that has applied for OINP again has been living here and working here for a few years. And so what he did is provided historical rental lease documents as well. So not just the place that he's currently renting. He showed that, hey, I've been here for years and I have multiple lease documents to show that, long term, I'm staying here in Ontario. There's another question here. Is there a period of time to wait for ITA under OINP? I've been waiting for 88 days since we submitted our OINP application in Toronto. Unfortunately, we can't predict, especially after the changes that were made on July 2nd. You would think that those changes would make processing faster, but generally they say from 60 to 90 days after applying. But in terms of waiting for an ITA, the draws have been, they're kind of getting more normalized now, but before we had a very large gap where there was no draws. So it could be any amount of time. You just have to make sure that you're staying on top of meeting the requirements during the time that you're waiting, and make sure that everything stays valid while you're waiting for an invitation to apply. For international student stream, does someone need a job offer? So yes, it's an employer job offer stream. So they're looking at you working in Ontario. It's something that they look at, one of the scoring factors, like how long you've been working with an employer. Again, employer job offer category. So an employer initiates the process. The international student stream just doesn't require you to have a minimum work experience. So if you've been working with that employer for like 3 or 4 months and they're willing to support your application, then you're still fine because you have gone to a Canadian eligible institution and meet the requirements of the international student stream. Oh, the questions are coming in so fast. Elena, could I get some help with the questions? It just keeps like knocking me all over the place.
Yes, I know. Let's see. All right, let's just see. Do you see Q&A box, I wonder?
Oh,
maybe we can see some there.
Yeah, because the chat is hot.
Yes, the chat just keeps scrolling down and down and down.
I start reading a question and then it scrolls right past it. Oh, I think these are from previous
Scroll all the way down.
Okay. Yes.
We have somebody on YouTube saying that they're watching live from the Bahamas.
Woo! Hi. And thank you for joining. Patrick asked where to get a designated list of designated employers under OINP. Patrick, I think you might be confusing OINP with RCIP, which is a federal program. RCIP requires designated employer job offer. Is Ontario still having draws for French speakers? I have not seen any. One sec. Oh, okay. The Q&A is getting hot too. Does wage matter in the international student stream as well? Wage does matter. So wage matters in the scoring factors. If you remember my slide with the scoring factors for international student stream, there's a different score allotted based on the wage per hour. So at a certain wage level, you'll get, so 40, I think it's $40 an hour or higher, you'll get the full 10 points for that scoring factor. As you get under that $40 an hour, it drops to like 8 points between a certain range. I think it's 35 to 39.99 an hour. It drops to 8 points. So the more you make per hour, the more your wage is, the more points you get in the international student stream. So it does matter in that stream as well. How long does it take to get a response once the employer has fulfilled the first part under the international student stream? So if you'll recall from the application process, the employer submits the job offer, they give you a job offer number, and then you submit your expression of interest. Once you've submitted your expression of interest and gotten your score, you are waiting for the OINP to conduct a draw. And if you meet the requirements, you'll get an email saying, we're inviting you to apply. So that could be at any point. The last few draws, I was honestly actually really surprised that my client that lived in Toronto got an invitation to apply because they've been targeting outside of the GTA so heavily. The last few draws have been heavy on Northern Ontario, basically everything outside the GTA. So if you're outside the GTA, you probably have a better chance in 2025. We don't know what 2026 is going to look like, but they've been heavily targeting outside of the Toronto area. So the wait, it just depends on how often they do a draw. It's really unpredictable now, though for the last few months, they have done a draw every month.
All right. Do we want to take one last question and then we'll go ahead with our next speaker, Supreet, who will talk about express entry profile creation.
Ooh, that's a fun one. I'm staying tuned for that. I will take one more question. Let me just look through and see. Okay, so Fernanda asks, the job tenure has to be with the OINP employer, or could it be previous experience in Ontario as well under the same sector? That is a good question. So the job tenure has to be with the employer that's making you the job offer. So it's the current employer essentially. And they do look at that, right? You can submit documents from previous employers if you've been here a while and have had other employers to show the what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. To show that you've had a number of years of work experience, but the tenure that they're looking at for the scoring factor is from the job offer employer. I hope that makes sense.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining in today. And let's welcome our next speaker, Diandra. Thank you. And we will see you on the day 3 at our panel speaking event, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
All right, let's welcome Supreet. Supreet is here to talk about express entry profile and red flags that probably you should know about when you're creating express entry profile. Hi, Supreet. How are you doing?
Hi everyone, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Okay, so let's see those top red flags when people creating express entry profiles.
Yes, just confirming you can hear my screen.
Yeah, you're all good. The sound is a little choppy, but like let's see how it goes. If anything, I'll just let you know.
Okay, just a warning, I am calling from Chandigarh, India. So if there are some issues with the internet, I'll try to get that sorted as we're going.
It's all
But
good. I think it's sounding pretty good. So yeah.
awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, hello everybody. I'm Supreet. I'm from Milin Immigration Services, and today I'll be speaking about red flags and express entry profiles. So we'll talk about the details that could cause your profile to be ineligible, and we want to help you create a consistent and confident express entry profile. So a little introduction from me. Again, hello, I'm Supreet. I have 4+ years of US and Canadian immigration experience. So over the years, I've helped clients with express entry, spousal sponsorship, PNPs, and temporary residence applications. And when I'm not obsessing over immigration, I'm traveling. Like I said, I'm currently in Chandigarh, India, and just a few weeks ago, I was in Hong Kong. Or I'm usually spending time with animals. I'm also a professional dog sitter, so I spend a lot of time with animals. Um, but let's get started on the deets. Okay, so we'll do a short summary of what is express entry, just so that we get a brief idea to get started. So express entry is Canada's online system for managing immigration applications from skilled workers. It's a point-based system, and every detail must be accurate for your profile to be eligible. Under the Express Entry program, there are 3 programs. So the Canadian Experience class, where most of the applicants must have 1 year work experience in the last 3 years. So that's 1560 hours. Does not need to be continuous, but it needs to be in a tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. We'll go into tiers a little bit further, a little bit later on. And then we have the Federal Skilled Worker Program. There you need 1 year of continuous work experience in the last 10 years, and it can be foreign work experience. And then we also have the Federal Skilled Trades Program. And that program, it's pretty dead right now. We haven't really heard a lot about it. But if it does revive, you need to have experience in specific NOC codes, and it must be 2 years of full-time work experience. So how Express Entry works is the first step is creating a profile. So that's basically what we'll be going over today, and some red flags to avoid while you're creating a profile. If your profile has enough points and you do get selected under the draw, you receive an invitation to apply. So when you receive an invitation to apply, you basically have 60 days to submit all your documents and your application for permanent residence. That's basically a short summary of how Express Entry would work. So Express Entry has something called CRS points. So you'll be hearing a lot of us talk about point system and Canadian Experience class. So the CRS is the comprehensive ranking system. It's used to rank your profile in the pool. It's what makes you competitive, and it's what makes your profile have a certain rank in the pool. So CRS is determined on certain criteria. So your age, a lot of times if you're under the age of 30, your points will increase as you age. But as soon as you hit the 30 mark and you go up, your points start to decrease. So it is important to get into the pool at an appropriate time. You have your level of education. So the higher education, the more points you will score in the Express Entry pool. Official language proficiency, so that's IELTS, CELPIP, TEF, TCF. The higher you score in these fields, the more points you'll get. Work experience as well. So this is foreign and Canadian work experience. The more work experience you gain, the more points you get. And right now, foreign work experience is super important and super key in getting, that competitive score in the pool. And then if you're married, your spouse or common law partner can also add to your ranking. So their level of education, their work experience, and how well they score in official languages could also impact your score. And then we also have skills transferability. So that is, it could be a type of a few things. If you reach a CLB 9 and you have a post-secondary education, you could gain up to 50 points. That can really help boost that profile. If you have Canadian experience and foreign work experience, that can also really help you gain points to get that ranking a little bit higher in the pool. And then additional factors like French, siblings. So if you have a sibling that's in Canada that is a Canadian or a PR, you can gain up to 15 points. Usually for that, you would have to show, proof of relationship. You would have to show, that they are in Canada and they are a Canadian citizen or a PR. So with the CRS system, accuracy really matters more than points. So every claim you make must match the documents that you provide in your PR application. So if you are claiming a certain amount of work experience, you need to make sure that your employer reference letter also states that you did that work experience in that NOC code for that amount of time. If you claim IELTS of CLB 9, you need to show your IELTS results that show that you have received that CLB 9. And then any updates or changes in can affect your eligibility. So if you've received new IELTS, if you've actually completed that 1 year work experience, you'll actually be eligible and be able to have a profile in the pool. And then any marital changes, changes to your education can also affect your score. So what makes a strong Express entry profile? A well-built profile is not just about luck, it's about strategy. So every section of your profile must tell a consistent story that matches the documents and your background. So the information you enter about your work experience, education, language scores, they need to be accurate and they need to be backed by evidence. A lot of times they'll have, foreign education credentials, and they'll say that they did a master's, but then when they do an ECA, it doesn't qualify as a master's. But you've given yourself the points of a master's degree. So that's where, you need to make sure that the documents you provide actually match, your profile. So 3 things that are really important in making a strong Express entry profile, accuracy, credibility, consistency. You need to make sure that all the documents, every date, every job title, every education record, it needs to be correct and it needs to be traceable. So even small errors like mixing up your employment start date or choosing the wrong NOC code, it can really affect, your PR application. You could receive an additional document request. You can receive a procedural fairness letter. You could even receive a refusal if the documents do not match what was written in your profile. Credibility. Your profile should really reflect your real background. It's not just what gets you the highest points. So every claim you make needs to be supported with valid proof, such as reference letters, pay stubs, degrees. That's when a real strong profile can take you, a long way. And consistency. I know Cory touched on this a little bit, but you want to make sure that your profile matches past applications. A lot of times people will submit study permit applications where, they'll omit foreign work experience, but then they'll add that foreign work experience when doing their PR application. That's when there's a discrepancy, and RCC has huge issues with that. So you really want to make sure that, your applications are consistent and you're providing, honest work experience when you're doing all your applications. We'll talk about our first red flag. I did see a few people in the comments and when other consultants were speaking about what is a NOC. So one of the red flags I'll talk about is choosing the wrong NOC when you're submitting your Express entry profile. The NOC is a National Occupation Classification. So it's a code system and it's Canada's national system for categorizing and describing occupations in Canada. And just recently in 2021, the NOC was updated to include a training, education, experience, and responsibilities component as well. And that's referred to as tier. So a little bit early on, I talked about, having eligibility for Canadian Experience Class and Federal Skilled Worker and needing tier O1, 2, or 3, experience in tier O1, 2, or 3. So that's extremely important. I'll go through tiers just really briefly, just so that you have an idea of, where your job could possibly, fit into. Tier 0 job refers to more of a management occupation. So someone, who's working, in a management role, like a marketing manager, financial manager, HR manager, you have staff under you, you're telling them what to do. Those are the kind of jobs that qualify under Tier 0. Tier 1 are occupations that usually require a university degree. So a financial advisor, an HR professional, an architect, software engineer, those kind of jobs that would fit into Tier 1. And then tier 2 are occupations that require a college diploma, some sort of apprenticeship training on above 2 years, or in a supervisory role. So, like a medical lab tech, early childhood educator, computer network, and web technicians would fall under tier 2. And then tier 3 are occupations that require a college diploma. You don't really need as much apprenticeship training. And even on the job training of about 6 months could allow you to qualify under tier 3. So some of the jobs could be bakers, dental assistants, cooks, nurse aides, admin assistants. So maybe just kind of like think about your job, what you're doing, and see if they would fall under one of these categories, because then you may be eligible if you have this amount of work experience required. Um, So a lot of times what people will do is they'll pick their knock code over based on the title of their job. So when you receive a job offer letter, a lot of times your employer is not referring to this website when they're selecting your job title compared to your job duties. So it is really on you to make sure that when you go on the knock website, you look at the job title that you think you have, and look at the duties and the responsibilities. That is the key. A lot of times people will base their knock off the job titles, but it's actually key to base your knock off of the job duties and responsibilities that you perform. When IRCC is reviewing your knock code, they're looking at the employer reference letter and the duties listed there, not the job title. So my rule of thumb usually is you want to make sure that at least 70% of the job duties and responsibilities listed on the NOC website match what you actually do. So this is really important because a lot of times, you may actually select the incorrect knock and you think you might not be eligible under express entry. Like, say you think you're in a tier 4 knock, but you're actually in a tier 3 knock. That really changes your eligibility criteria, right? If you're eligible to actually have an express entry profile or not. So to avoid these mistakes, I usually ask clients to sit down and just make a list of the duties that you perform. Off the top of your head, what do you do daily at work? What are some of the duties that you for sure do 100% almost every day? And then I also usually have the client refer to the job offer letter. A lot of times the employer will write the list of duties that you're required to perform. And then based on that, you go on the NOC website and you just take a look and see if that job title, that NOC code actually matches the job duties that you perform. And then also when you go on the NOC website, you'll see for the specific NOC that you select, there will be a lead statement. A lot of times the lead statement will be very specific on maybe the setting of where you perform work. So that may actually help you narrow down and find the correct NOC code for you. And again, you want to make sure that at least 70% of your job duties match the NOC description. That's usually my rule of thumb. I don't like to go lower than that, just because IRCC is getting stricter and stricter as time is coming, and you just want to make sure that that's not an error that you make. And then also on the NOC website, you'll also see that there'll be education and experience listed. So you can also take a look and see, do I have the education required to perform this job? If you don't, maybe you need to find a different NOC code. And if it does, maybe that's the best fit for you. Okay, so red flag number 2, we're going to discuss a little bit about the education section on the express entry profile. So a few things to double check. One of the biggest red flags that I see, and it actually decreases your points significantly. A lot of times people miss out on this. But when you're completing your express entry profile, there is a section under education that asks, was more than half the study program English or French as a second language course? So you should only select yes if your program was designed to teach you English or French as the main subject. So that's FSL, ESL. Did you enroll in this course to learn the language? If your program was a regular diploma, degree, or postgraduate diploma program that was just taught in English or French, the answer to this question should be no. The language of instruction is not the same as a program type. That's really important to remember. So sometimes you can lose up to 15 plus points depending on your level of education. So if you say yes to this, it basically makes your education ineligible because IRCC thinks that, oh, you just took an ESL course. You didn't actually graduate with a diploma or a degree. So it's really important to read this question carefully. A lot of times it is confusing and the wording is a little confusing. So it is easy to overlook, but this is something to keep a note of. Okay, so red flag number 3 is when you are losing points due to ECA evaluations. A lot of applicants will only get ECAs for their highest credential, so such as a master's degree. And sometimes when you do get an ECA, it could come back as a 1-year postgraduate diploma. Sometimes WES will not recognize it as a master's degree. So, and then when you do that, you significantly lose CRS points. And so what most people don't realize is that you can actually earn points under the 2 or more post-secondary credentials if you have your bachelor's and you have your master's degree assessed. So if your master's is downgraded to a post-grad diploma, but your bachelor's is recognized as a Canadian bachelor's degree, equivalent to a Canadian bachelor's degree, you can still claim higher points than what would be a single postgraduate diploma. So like I've mentioned on the slide here, ECA for master's only, if it equals a postgrad diploma, you could get 90 CRS education points. But then if you, evaluate your master's as a postgrad and a bachelor's as a bachelor's degree, you can get 128 CRS points. So you're not really, even though you're not getting the points for master's, you're still gaining those 30 points, which really could be crucial to your ranking in the express entry pool. That could make or break you into getting an ITA. So always include your bachelor's degree in your ECA application, even if you have a master's. It gives you some flexibility in case your higher credential is not fully recognized. And getting both, credentials assessed protects your CRS score. So, and it also ensures that you get education points true to your academic background. Yeah, and red flag number 4. So proof of funds. I also did see some people asking about proof of funds in previous questions. So I hope I can kind of give an idea of how it works and who actually needs to provide proof of funds. So when you create your profile, you must enter the amount of settlement funds you have. If you declare less than the required amount for your family size, your profile may not meet the eligibility requirements for federal skilled worker or federal skilled trade programs. So if you enter more than you have and you can't prove it, your PR application could likely be refused. So not everyone is required to show proof of funds. Canadian experience class applicants don't need to show proof of funds. So even if you do get selected, you do get an ITA. If you are eligible under CEC, you are not required to show the proof of funds. Also, if you're authorized to work in Canada and you have a valid job offer, even if you're a federal skilled trade or federal skilled worker applicant, you are not required to show proof of funds. So on the right here, I have the screenshot from the Canada.ca website showing the proof of funds required for the family size. So the way family size is calculated is it would be yourself, your spouse or common law partner, any dependent children you have, or your spouse or common law's dependent children. Even if they're Canadian or a PR, and even if they're not accompanying, you are required to show the funds for them as well. And also, to show proof of funds, you are mostly required to show a bank letter, an official bank letter. It'll have your name, it'll have account details, any outstanding debts you have, and it's also important to show, your average bank balance for the last 6 months. You want to make sure that when you're submitting your PR application, you do have those funds accessible to you, and you want to keep it that way for the duration of your entire application because you never know when you could get an additional document request and be requested, for those documents. So you always want to make sure that you're consistently keeping that amount of money in your bank account. And it's also very important that you have access to these funds. You will need to show that. Okay, and a few important details about your express entry profile. You want to make sure, one of the biggest red flags is updating important, oops, sorry, updating important changes in your profile. So if you have, an expired IELTS, CELPIP, TEF, TCF, you do want to make sure that you are up to date and you have new scores updated on there. If your, language proficiency results expire, your profile becomes ineligible. So it's very important to keep note of that. If you retake the test and you get higher results, you should update, your profile because that will give you higher score. Sometimes, a CLB 7 or a CLB 6 won't help your profile as much, but if you get a CLB 9, it actually unlocks points and skills transferability as well. So you could unlock up to 50 points extra. So it's really important that, you keep note of, any time you have a higher score so that your profile is competitive in the pool. And then if obviously if your test expires, make sure that you do another test so that your profile stays eligible. So always track the expiry date and update your tests right away. If you have any changes in your marital status, it's also really important to update. If you submit an application and you're married and you don't mention that in your application, that's basically misrepresentation and could lead to a PFL or, additional document request. You would be answerable to IRCC. So it is important that you, make sure that everything is up to date. A lot of times, adding or removing a spouse can also affect your CRS score. So, it affects your score based on work experience, education, and language proficiency. And if your marital status changes, make sure you update it immediately so your profile stays honest and accurate. And then job changes, promotions, or loss of employment. So work experience is a very, very key part of your eligibility. If you change jobs, you get promoted, or you stop working for a certain employer, you need to make sure that your profile is accurate and up to date. If you quit your job and you don't update your profile will keep assuming that you're working and keep every time you hit a new year work experience, it will keep increasing your score. But if you've quit the job and you're getting those points, it could cause issues and it could lead to, a refusal because you actually didn't do the work. And like job changes can also affect your knock codes. Say, you were working at tier 2, tier 3 job and now you have a tier 4 job, you probably wouldn't get points for that. And then also it's important to keep your employment history accurate because IRCC verifies all the information through the employment reference letters. So it's very important to make sure that, you're up to date on your profile. And then new education credentials or completed degrees. So, if you finish a new program or you got a new degree, make sure you update that because you will get more points. And that could be make it or break it for you at that point. You never know. And many applicants, they forget to add the new credentials, and then you miss out on those valuable points. And also getting updated ECAs. Sometimes, you can go to one organization and they'll recognize your degree in one way, and then you can go to another organization, they may recognize your degree in a different way. So you do want to make sure that you are up to date on that part. And you also want to make sure that your profile reflects your highest completed education. Very important. And then a few dates, just so that you are also keeping this in mind. But language tests, IELTS, CELPIP, TEF, TCF, they're valid for 2 years. So keep that in mind. Have a clock, have it in your calendar. My IELTS are expiring soon. I need to make sure that I go and redo them, update them again. You don't want to let that expire. ECA is also valid for 5 years. So when you're in your express entry, when you're in the pool, you want to make sure that all these documents are valid. If your ECA validity, if the 5 years pass, you no longer, are able to prove that. It might take time. It might take time to get a new ECA, so you want to make sure that, it's all up to date. And then Canadian work experience for the Canadian experience class, it's 1 year in the past 3 years. So that's also important to keep in mind that, if you worked 2 years ago, you want to put yourself in the pool now so that, you can still, use that work experience to your advantage. And then foreign work experience, at least 1 year in the past 10 years. So once you're ready, don't delay entering the pool. Put yourself in the pool, even if your IELTS is not the highest. If you still, want to further your education, put yourself in the pool because you never know, what could happen. And you also want to make sure that, you're using those work experience years to your advantage. Um, And yeah, that's my presentation. I think I have a lot of time for Q&A, so I'm definitely happy to, take some questions. And I also have a QR code if you'd like to, book a consultation. If you have further questions, you can use a promo code SUMMIT for 25% off consultations. But yeah, happy to answer any questions anyone would have.
Thank you so much, Supreet. It was great. I loved it. Definitely
Okay,
much
awesome.
needed for everyone who's creating their profile. Now, okay, guys, if you want to put your questions in Q&A box, it would be easier for Supreet to really see them because the chat is just scrolling down and down and down.
Yes.
Or you can, or if you want to have a priority lane, you can go on our YouTube and put a question in the chat, and then I'll read it to Supreet because we're just trying to get our small YouTube channel growing. Okay, Supreet, you have access to Q&A box. You want to start?
Yes. So if my express entry pool expires soon, is there a disadvantage to creating a new one and re-entering the pool again? So sometimes what happens is there's a cutoff. So if you make your express entry profile within a certain time and you have that competitive score, say, the score is 534, and you made your profile just last week and the cutoff was like March, you might not have made it. So those are the disadvantages. But if you need to have a new profile in the pool, you gotta have a new profile in the pool. Like I'd rather you put a profile in the pool, and then if you're that close to the draw, it's likely you'll get selected again. Okay, so for the bachelor's and master's degree, so a lot of times what happens is, you'll get an ECA done and maybe West will not recognize it as a master's degree and they could recognize it as a postgraduate diploma. So what you can do is if you also have a foreign bachelor's degree, you should get your foreign bachelor's degree assessed as a bachelor's degree so that you can claim points for 2 or more credentials. That will give you more points than getting points as a postgraduate diploma solely. I hope that clarifies. Uh, let's see here. Can I make an express entry for the pool and then also for Quebec PEQ pool at the same time? So if you are in Quebec, you would not be eligible for federal immigration. You would only be eligible under Quebec. You would probably get a PFL or an ADR that would that where the officer would ask you to show that you have intention of not residing in Quebec. So a lot of times people show, potential emails with recruiters or, applying for jobs or leases to show that, we're planning to get out of Quebec and moving to another province. Yeah, if you have a Canadian bachelor and a foreign master, you would still claim points for two or more credentials. If your foreign master's is, you have the ECA completed for that. University degree, usually with Wes, they request it directly from the school. Usually you do not send it yourself. So for a proof of fund, can I use my husband's statement of account owing to the fact that he has capacity? You would have to show that you have access to those funds. So maybe your name on the joint account would be a great way to show that. That would be a way that you can show. No, you don't need an ECA from West for a Canadian degree. You only need ECAs for foreign degrees. Sorry, I think there's other in the chat as well, if I'm not wrong. Sorry. If I finish my foreign work in May 2020 and I work for 3 years after that, my points will count for the 3 years of experience until May 2030. So your work experience is valid for your foreign work experience is valid for 10 years. So you want to make sure that you have at least 1 year work experience in the 10-year time period. If the bachelor's degree is not recognized by Wes, sorry, it's moving so fast. Do I only put my master's degree to apply? So I mean, it's a little confusing because it depends on if your master's degree uh, is recognized as a master's degree. You would have to probably get an ECA depending if your bachelor's degree was not recognized by West, you'd probably have to get an ECA done for your master's degree if it's a foreign degree. Hello, if I do not have 1 year work experience yet as I'm pursuing my master's and predict to have work experience in 2028, is that too late? No, your master's degree stays with you, so that's not an issue. If you do not have 1 year work experience yet, you would not qualify to be in the express entry pool, so you would have to wait to get that work experience to put in the pool. But I'm not sure what you mean by if it's too late. There's no timeline that you have to put it in by if you're basing it off your master's degree. It's mostly an work experience requirement, 1 in 3 years or 1 in 10 years for a foreign degree. Uh, I can't really answer to what would be a better credential assessment agency for foreign masters. There's no harm in getting both done just to see. Sometimes a client will get West done and then they'll go to ICAS and they might IQAS and they may, have a different evaluation. So it doesn't hurt to get both done. Sorry, can I create an express entry profile without current job, but I have 3 years of Canadian job experience in Toronto? If it's within the last 3 years, then yes, you do not need to have current work experience. 420 right now, It depends, if you have French, it's a great score. If you don't, 420's probably not your best bet. You might want to look into PNP. I'm a student and traveling to Canada by the student visas to study an MBA, and I'm going with my husband who has been granted a work visa. How should be my pathway to PR? I would need to know a few more details. I don't really know a lot about your background and what your work experience is in. So, I would say best to speak to a consultant and kind of get a little bit more of an idea of what your background is. For PhD, I don't have all the points at the top of my head, but if you go online and just search up CRS score, express entry, you'll be able to actually just take a look and see what your score is based on all your qualifications. My scores are 379, 448. I believe you may be speaking about French. Again, it depends on a few more details. I would need to know, sorry, Floor. I would not be able to answer that question. I would just say go on and check your calculator and see what points you're getting and if you're actually even eligible. If you make a GCK account, you can definitely go on there and you can fill out a few questions, answer them out, and you'll be able to know if your profile is eligible or not. That's the best way to do it. You know yourself the best, you know your qualifications, you know your credentials the best, so that's the best way to go about it. I mean, I don't see express entry. Someone asked if express entry will still be open in 2028. I don't see express entry, uh, sorry, I'm worried that by my timeline it would be harder and my occupation is not on that list. So I would say it is best to just, watch out for the news, what's going on, what kind of occupations are in demand. Like Cory said earlier, there may be new occupations eligible for category-based selections for express entry. So it's best to just keep a lookout and see the news and what's going on. But I don't see express entry going away anywhere. If I add French to my English score, can it increase my CRS score? Yes, yep, definitely. Having a second language will definitely increase your definitely increase your score. Not just in the second language proficiency, but also in, I believe, the adaptability factor as well. So you could bump up quite a bit of points. Can I apply for express entry if we have not submitted my diploma to WES? Again, it is best if you have your ECA completed before you do your express entry profile, just because you do not want to claim points higher than what you have. If you think your diploma is a bachelor's, but then it comes back as like a 2-year diploma, that's less points. So you want to make sure that, your profile is accurate. There's also no point in getting having a higher score because you want to be realistic. If you do get selected with the higher score and you're not able to prove it, it does just ultimately, it's a refusal in your PR application or at least an additional document request. To prove your work experience, so I know my colleague Barbara will be speaking about post-IT documents a little bit, but just a little rough idea. There is a mandatory employment reference letter that is required. I'm sure Barbara will go over that. Pay stubs to show that you were working, having like offer letters. There's a plethora of documents that you can provide for that, but you will hear more about that, I'm sure, in a few days. No, you do not get points for job offers anymore. I think that was removed earlier this year. Is it a good idea to postpone our masters to get work experience now or finish masters, then get work experience? Again, I don't really know your profile, so I wouldn't be able to advise. It's best to, book a consultation with a consultant. We would be able to get to know a little bit more about your previous history and see, what qualifications you already have. And like also what occupation are you working in? That also makes a huge difference because maybe you don't need as high points as you think you do. 11 months of foreign work experience would not get you points. You need at least a minimum of 1 year. So if you have 11 months, it would need to hit the 1560 hours. So you'd probably have to do a little bit of a calculation. To verify your eligibility for express entry, so you can make an IRCC GC key account, and on that, what you do is you just say that you want to apply for express entry and make a profile. And so what it'll do is prompt a few questions that you can answer, and then once you answer those questions, it'll let you know if you qualify under any class and if you're eligible under express entry as well. Someone has an OINP question. Yeah, you would have to wait for OINP to link link your nomination to your profile. And maybe Olena could answer best. I am from BC, the West Coast, so I'm not super familiar with OINP as maybe the pros are here. Uh, Yeah, so you're saying that if the bachelor's degree is not recognized by WES and master's degree is Canadian university, do I just put master's degree? Yeah, you would just say that you have a Canadian master's degree in the express entry profile. Yes.
I'm just going to go back to Maria's question about OINP certification expiring. So, Maria, definitely you should be worried because OINP is generally very fast in responding, and OINP should be able to grant you those 600 points back in your express entry profile when you contact them. Usually when people, so we just recently had a case in September. So somebody came to us in exact your shoes. So his application, it was not returned, it was actually refused. So then he contacted us. So we needed to get 600 points back on the profile. And we were able to do it, I think, within like 2 days, because OINP and generally all PNPs are pretty fast with giving you back 600 points. So if it's been a while since you've heard from them, definitely like email them, call them. They're pretty good. Yeah. But if you can't figure out, then definitely like reach out to us or to whomever, because if your certification expires in December, like you should be able to get an invitation to apply before December, right? So yeah, it's definitely not a huge big deal, but logistically you have to be able to figure it out like pretty fast.
Yes, thank you. I also do want to clarify one thing about my master's and bachelor's red flag. So you do get points. You do get higher points for a master's degree. My point was for people who did an ECA for a foreign master's degree and it came out as a post-grad diploma. So if you have a master's degree, you don't need to claim points for a bachelor's degree or 2 or more degrees. You only need to claim points for a master's degree. It's only if your master's is evaluated as a post-secondary diploma, you can get 2 extra points if you also evaluate your bachelor's degree. Let's see if anybody has any other questions. I know my time is running out.
Yeah, we're still waiting for Anna to join, so you're good.
Okay.
So we can
An
take
ideal
up
time to create a profile, complete school in December 2024 and started working in May 2025. So you have to have that 1 year work experience, full like 1560 hours for CEC, for you to actually be able to be eligible to create a profile. So even if you did try and you like I mentioned before, if you go on the GC key, you'll be able to fill out a few answers. One of the questions will ask you how much Canadian work experience do you have, or how much work experience do you have? And if you write less than a year, it'll tell you that your profile isn't, you're not eligible to apply for express entry yet. So you would not be able to apply until May 2026 if you've completed, the 30 hours a week, 1560 hours. Awesome. Okay, and Anna is here, so I will say my farewell. But yes, if you would like to book a consultation with me, you can use the QR code and then promo code Summit for 25% off. It was wonderful being here, and thank you so much, Elena, for having me, and thanks for all the questions, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can find all the promo codes, all the links, and all the information in the description of YouTube video. You can subscribe, you can go there, even if you're watching on Zoom, and make sure that you have contact details of the speakers that you found the most useful for your situation. And now we have our last speaker of the day, Anna. How's it going?
Oh, it's been a long day. I've been enjoying watching everyone. I couldn't figure out how to turn this around, but anyways, it's weird. I was really enjoying Supreet's presentation. I almost was late for mine, so yeah, it was really enticing.
All right. So
So
Anna today is talking about spousal open work permits, right?
that is correct. Yes, we're gonna be
Okay,
talking about.
perfect.
Oops.
Well, go ahead. And then, of course, as usual, in the end, Anna will do some questions. So make sure you stick around.
Oh, yes, for some reason, I don't know why it won't let me.
Oh, let me sharing. Let me just
Yes, but I'm not sure it's you. I think it might be me. Jeez.
try again because I had some technical problems. It kicked me out. So let's just see now. Does it work now?
Not really. Let's see.
It should work.
Oh, I don't know what's happened. I'm so sorry. I should have gotten this taken care of, but I just.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Meanwhile, guys, think about your questions when it comes to spousal open work permit. I've seen some questions in the chat before.
I apologize. I think I'm gonna have to quit and come back. Would you mind waiting for
Yeah,
me
sure.
again?
That's
I
no problem.
apologize terribly. Thank you.
That's no problem. Yeah, guys, I've seen a lot of questions about SOWP, so spousal open work permit, in the chat before. So make sure you put them in a Q&A box for spousal open work permits. Again, what spousal open work permits are, and I'm sure Anna will cover that, is when one person, so in a couple, right, that marries or common law couple, one person is either studying or working in Canada. And by that, there are certain opportunities how their couple person, so their partner, common law partner, or a spouse, can get a spousal open work permit, right? So we're talking, not to be confused with spousal sponsorship. So we're talking about two people in a couple who are on a temporary residence, so on either work permits or one study permit and one work permit. And yay, Anna, we can see a screen now.
Oh, yes, it's just that it's not the one that I wanted to
That's a wrong
show.
screen, but we'll figure it
It
out.
is, but oh God, I am honestly so sorry. This is,
No, it's
I
okay.
guess,
It's
the
okay.
joy of
That's
a live
fine.
event.
Yes. And guys, I'm going to give you the link again. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will actually able to leave your questions under our video. And that would give you a little bit of a priority lane because I see those comments and it's not that many as in this Zoom webinar. So a little bit of priority lane. So subscribe to our YouTube, go to the video that is live right now, and you can leave your comments there as well. All right, Anna, you're all set.
Oh, thank God. It has been a crazy day today. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I know it's been a long day. It has been a long day for me too. I got stuck at my daughter's daycare, lost my car keys. It's been a whole day. Anyways, here we are, and I'm very happy to be with you. I'm gonna go into a bit of an introduction, and then we'll go into the meat of our topic. So, yeah, my name is Anna Canseco. I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and the founder of Merhouse Immigration. And I first came to Canada about 20 years ago. Like many of you, I had to navigate, all the ups and downs of trying to start your life in a new country. About 5 years in, it was just too hard for us, and we actually went back to Mexico. But my heart was always set on coming back. So we finally did in 2020. And I had to once again reinvent myself. And this time I decided to actually do what I refused to do the first time around, which is go back to school. So I did. I went to the Queen's University program for in citizenship and immigration law and became an RCIC. And I have been working in immigration for about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. So at the beginning of this year, I had this moment where I was trying to find really my next step. And I needed some kind of like divine intervention to figure out what was my reason for waking up every day and going to work. And this beautiful quote found me in a almost magical way. And it gave me, it's a quote from a non-Bengali poet. It was the first non-European to be awarded the Nobel Prize in literature back in 1913. And this quote is all about service. So, as I said, this quote gave me my why. And it has guided me through this year, and I'm sure it will guide me for the next few years. And it just says that my mission is simple. I just want to be of service. That's what I do, I find true joy in spending my days helping couples and families just find their way in the Canadian immigration system. So that's a little bit about me, and let's just go over what we will be talking about for the next few minutes. So I'm going to be talking about spousal open work permits, and we will be covering issues like just the landscape. What is an SOWP, spousal open work permit? We'll go over what is IRCC really looking for in your application. I'll give you some tips on how to make your application stronger. And we're going to go over some frequently asked questions. I have some questions here that some people, my followers on TikTok have sent my way, but please feel free to post them in the chat, not the chat, but the Q&A box, and we will also address those at the end. So I know it's been a long day, so I need to pull you back in. So let's start with a quick checkup. If you can just let me know which of this best describes your current situation if you are looking at spousal open work permits. So either you're in Canada with a work or study permit and your spouse is abroad. You're both in Canada but haven't applied yet, or you have already applied and you're waiting for your decision, or you've already received a refusal. So if you can just use the chat to just, that was fast. Will the slides be shared? I'm not sure if mine will be, but you'll have access to this recording. So we have lots of Bs. So you haven't applied yet, that's great. We've got one C, waiting for a decision. That's hard. More Bs. So great, you're in the right place. So regardless of where you are, even that D that I see there, it's not the end of the road. So you are in the right place, because what I will share today with you, it will help you not only avoid the refusals for those who are still thinking about applying, but it will also help you recover from one. Now, for those who are waiting, there's nothing to do but wait and hope. But also you can prepare for the future, whatever IRCC decides to do. So now that we know where we are, I want to explain, just so that we make sure that we're on the same page. I want you to know exactly what a spousal open work permit is. And what's more important is that for this type of application, it takes two to tango. What I mean by this is that IRCC will be looking at 2 people, and each have to comply with their own requirements. So we have the principal foreign national, or the international student or foreign worker. And we have the applicant, which is the spouse who is looking for a spousal open work permit. Okay. Now, for this type of work permit, the applicant does not need an LMIA, and you don't need a job offer either, as this will be an open work permit. You can work for any employer once you get that. But what it's very important to keep in mind, and what I will be spending most of my presentation on, is that not all international students are created equal. Not all occupations are created equal. So let's go into that. I don't know if you can see the rest of I can change screens. There we go. All right, so let's start with the spouses of international students. So these are the specific requirements for the spouses of international students. And for this type of work permit, the principal foreign national, that is the student, needs to comply with certain criteria. First, they need to hold a valid study permit or an LOI in case they applied outside Canada. They need to be either physically in Canada at the time of the application or prove their intent to be in Canada after the SOWP is approved. They also, and here's the meat of this work permit, they need to be enrolled full-time in a PTWP eligible institution, a DLI, and in a PTWP eligible program. Now, let's remember that not all DLIs offer PTWP eligible programs. And even if they do, not all of their programs may be eligible for PTWP. So this is where research and informing yourself and planning is so important. So studying in Canada is super expensive. You need to make sure that if you're taking that step, that you are investing your time and energy in a program that actually aligns with your goals. So make sure that you do a lot of research beforehand. And now, of course, the question that follows is, what are those eligible programs? And we have, for example, PhDs. All PhDs programs, if you're enrolled in one, you'll be able to apply for your spouse's open work permit. As far as master's degrees, these need to be at least 16 months in duration. And for any other professional degree, there's actually a list on IRCC's website that mentions exactly which programs are eligible. Some examples are medicine, law, nursing, engineering, just some of the examples here. Now, all of this information is valid as of not even today, but yesterday when I revised all of this information, reviewed. IRCC can make any changes at any time without notice. And these changes may also include the list of eligible programs. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, for spouses of foreign workers, the principal foreign national must be authorized to work. That is, by either holding a work permit, an LOI, or being authorized to work under Section 186 of the regulations. This section of the regulations provides for authorization to work without having to apply for a work permit, but just to very specific list of people. For example, we have business visitors, we have athletes, we have family members of diplomats. So they can all come to Canada and work without having to apply for a work permit because the regulations authorize them to do so. But again, not all work permits and not all authorizations to work are created equal. So there are specific work permits that even if you have an occupation, an eligible occupation that we're going to talk about in a minute, and even if you comply with every other requirement, you're still not able to apply for this work permit. And we have, for example, if you have a co-op work permit, that is not eligible for this program. If you have a work permit as a refugee applicant, that is not eligible for this program either. As far as authorizations to work, For example, if you applied for a PGWP and you're allowed to work, you comply with those requirements needed to be able to keep working during the processing of your application, that authorization to work, even though it is included in R186, there's a specific exception for that clause. So for that section of that regulation. So you are not able to apply for a spousal open work permit if you're authorized to work as a PGWP applicant under maintained status. So this means that if you are planning on applying for a PGWP and your spouse's open work permit at the same time, you either have to do so at the same time because you're already eligible, so you have an eligible occupation, or you need to wait until the PGWP is actually approved and then see if you comply with all of the other requirements and then submit your spousal open work permit application. Now, another very important eligibility criteria is that either the work permit or, let's say, the authorization to work must be valid for at least 16 months at the time you submit your spousal open work permit application. Now, and this is the point that makes it so hard to get this kind of work permits, because you need to be, first of all, we all know that the employment market right now is not at its best. It's very hard. Now, you as the principal foreign national, not only do you need to have your work permit and have a job offer or be actually working, you need to actually have an eligible occupation. And these are limited. So what are these eligible occupations? That would be any occupation in tier 0 or 1, or a select list of occupations in tier 2 or 3. Now, this was addressed also in the last presentation by Supreet, but I just want to go over how you actually find out your tier or your tier number or the tier of your occupation. And this is, again, all based on the NOC list that was mentioned in the last presentation. And each occupation has a NOC code. This NOC code is made up of 5 digits. The second digit of that NOC code is actually your tier. So if after you go over the NOC code and you believe and you are certain that that's the one that applies to your occupation, then you need to go and look into that second digit. If that second digit is a 2 or a 3, then you need to go into the IRCC's website and confirm if that occupation is within the list of eligible occupations. If your tier is 4 or 5, then you're just out of luck. It's not eligible. Again, this list, as any other information or eligibility criteria, can change at any time. Finally, the last requirement, of course, Canadian residence. So the principal foreign national needs to either be currently in Canada or show that they have plans and prove that they have plans to actually move to Canada once the application is approved. Now, here's the truth. Many refusals could have been avoided. And here's where many go wrong. You need to make sure that your application leaves absolutely no space for doubt. So when it comes to any immigration application, it's the applicant's responsibility to prove to IRCC that you are eligible. So my best advice for you here is that while you're preparing your application, you always do it with this mantra in mind, saying that your goal is to make the officer's job easy. You need to make it easy for the officer to say yes. So then the next question for you would be, how exactly do you do this? And that's easy. You need to give IRCC what they're looking for. So IRCC wants to see documents, wants to see proof that you meet the eligibility requirements. And here are just 4 examples. When it comes to eligibility, IRCC wants proof that the principal foreign national is either enrolled in an eligible, I'm sorry, it's actually not either, it's actually enrolled in a study program. So that can be either an acceptance letter, a transcript, or their grades, or a combination of these documents, if you have them available. Now, if the foreign national is a foreign worker, then you have two things that you need to prove. You need to prove that the foreign national, the principal foreign national, is either currently employed or will be employed in an eligible occupation. And you also need to prove that the occupation is eligible. So it's the time that is currently employed or will be employed plus that it's an eligible occupation. And here is where you'll focus on employment contracts and employment letters. And this is very important. You need to pay attention to the content of these documents. So you need to prove also that the occupation is eligible, and it's essential for the officer to determine if it's eligible or not, for you to include a clear description of the duties in those documents. If you are already working, I would also say include proof of wages, your proof of payment. Again, eligible study programs and eligible occupations can change without notice, so make sure that you check first before submitting your application. When it comes to eligible occupations, remember that we want to focus on the NUC code and the duties, not on the title of the occupation. And this was also mentioned in last presentation, which I thought it's always good to double down on that, because again, it's the duties that we're looking at, not the position title. What I like to do in my submission letters in cases like this, where you need to prove your NUC code, is to include a little table comparing the duties of the NUC as they appear on the NUC website and the duties as they appear in the documents that you're submitting. And just do a little comparison, like checking off which ones you comply with. So remember that you want to stay away from straight up copy paste, but instead you want to paraphrase. You want the job duties on your employment contract and letter to paraphrase what the NUC list website is mentioning. Now, when we talk about relationship, well, you remember how I mentioned that it takes two to tango? Well, this is another key element for this type of work permits, and that's that you need to actually submit documents to prove the relationship between the two of you. So the principal foreign national and the applicant. And depending on your circumstances, that can either be through a marriage certificate or a statutory declaration of common law, which is just an immigration form, IMM 5409. Now here, you need to be aware that if there's anything in your relationship that may raise a red flag, anything out of the ordinary. So if you're like married but living apart, or if this is a very recent marriage, anything like that, you also need to explain this in your letter of explanation. So you need to build up your application using this amazing tool that's the letter of explanation. So again, it's up to you to make sure that the officer has no doubt that your relationship is genuine. And of course, as for the temporary residence, this is super important. And it's something that's not necessarily mentioned in the document checklist that you find in the IRCC's website. And that's because this requirement is actually embedded in the regulations too. So officers need to see that you understand and have every intention to respect the temporary status. That's regardless of any possible future plans for PR. Again, this is where you get to shine in your letter of explanation, right? You need to outline ties to your home country. And what are some of these ties? It can be proof that you own property back home. Employment prospects, that's also something that you can use, but you need to be aware that you need to include specific examples. maybe some blurb about how your experience working in Canada can make you a more attractive candidate once you go back home, and name some companies where you would like to work, or just some specific examples of how this experience is going to make you a better candidate once you go back home. You can also use, if you have any plans to continue any studies back home, or mention any family that you have left behind. If you have any savings, that's also good for your ties. There's not an exact list here, so it really depends on your special circumstances. I've had cases where the ties to home country are close to non-existent, and here's where I usually just dive into case law and build a very strong letter of explanation. Oh, another thing that you can use, and I like to mention it here, is if you have any positive travel history or immigration history, if you're able to provide proof that you've traveled to other countries and you've always complied with the terms and conditions of your status, that's also a positive, and I also like to include it in this section in the explanation letter or the submission letter. And of course, you need to provide documents. So that would be either if you have any stamps on your passport, which you already have to include, that will serve as proof of this positive travel history. And finally, we have more like a negative. And by this, I mean one thing that IRCC does not want to see. And this is documents that are either incomplete, that have been cut off, that are blurry, or that contradict each other. And this is surprisingly common. So mismatched job letters, missing pay stubs, or if one document mentions one not code and the other one mentions another one, these are just small mistakes that can, in the best case, cause delays, and the worst case scenario can actually lead to a refusal. And here I'd like to include, and I include that at the end, a very practical tip. Make sure that you provide at least one document to prove each of the eligibility criteria. So if you're declaring that your spouse is actually enrolled, include proof of enrollments, include grades. If you're declaring that your spouse is currently working, include pay stubs, include bank statements. Oh, and bank statements, and this is a crazy story. It's actually from a colleague, not from myself, but they submitted proof of the wages, the pay stubs, but IRCC came back with a refusal saying that they failed to include bank statements showing the wages actually being deposited. It's truly crazy. But again, this is where we are now. IRCC will come up with crazy reasons for refusals, but only if you let them. So let's make sure that you, again, make their job easy and provide everything above and beyond for them to be able to say yes. And you need to provide all the documentation in a clear and a well-organized manner. Let's jump into another client story. A few weeks ago, I met with, was months ago actually, when we started seeing them. So it's this couple came to me after a refusal. The officer's notes said that the officer was not satisfied that the principal foreign national was actually employed in an eligible occupation. They work under application on their own and included a job offer, recent pay stubs, and even an employer letter. And obviously they were frustrated. They did everything right on paper. So what I did is we went deep into their application and their actual documents that they submitted. And we noticed that the employer letter did not clearly describe the job duties. So it left something to be desired. So this made it impossible for the officer to determine that it was actually eligible. So what did we do? We went back, we prepared a new, stronger, and updated application. This time we included a revised version of the employment contract and the employer letter, and the application was approved. And here, I want to take just a quick detour to actually tell you that the only reason we were able to know for sure what was the weak point in their application was the fact that this amazing couple kept a copy of every single document that they actually submitted with their application. So this is a very important tip. Always, always keep a copy of your applications, of every single document that you actually submit. If you work on your own, keep it. If you work with the help of any representative, if they are a consultant, regulated consultant, or a lawyer, they are meant to give you a copy of your application. So ask for it and keep it, save it. So let's do a little recap of the most important tips on how to build a strong application. First, prepare your application beforehand. Think of your application as a story told through documents. You need to write a letter of explanation. This is such an important tool. This is where you get to shine and actually present a very clear summary of what each document you submit is actually proving. This is again where you explain anything out of the ordinary, but always making sure also that it's short, it's professional, and it's fact-based. By fact-based, I mean that this is not the time nor the place for a soap opera. You're not trying to convince the officer to be nice. You're trying to prove that you meet the criteria. And then again, always check the eligibility before you apply, because this can change at any time. Remember, it's always your job to make it easy for the officer to say yes. So again, the rule of thumb to include at least one document to prove each of the eligibility criteria. And most importantly, don't rush. A small delay in reviewing your application is better than weeks after weeks of waiting and then getting a refusal. So take your time. And I just want to present some final thoughts before we go over to the frequently asked questions. And these are my final thoughts. There is no price for doing this alone. Immigration is not always straightforward. It can be complex. And I know my clients are very capable and they are experts in their own field. But you can't really be an expert in every single field. And you don't have to be. There's a lot of help out there. During these 3 days, you're going to meet 17 different RCICs. And each one of them, I know, truly wants to see you succeed. So you have an amazing opportunity here, not only to get valuable information, but to get to know a little bit about each one of us. And as no two applicants are the same, not two RCICs are the same. And finding the right professional for you is not about luck. It's about connection. So again, there's no need to go about this alone. There are many professionals out there that offer so many different services, from consultations to review services to full representation. Find someone you connect with, ask questions, reach out. And on that note, if you'd like some personalized guidance after today's session, I'd be more than happy to meet with you one-on-one. You can visit my website, merhouseimmigration.ca, and use the code SUMMIT, and you'll get a special price for 1-hour consultations. And you can also find me in LinkedIn and TikTok. TikTok, I usually do my content in Spanish. Oh, and by the way, we also started it's a newborn baby. We have a podcast called Lisa y Ana en Canadá. And that is, I'm going to find a way to give you the link. It's very, very new. And we also provide lots of immigration advice in Spanish if you're interested. Now, I do have some questions, but instead of sharing my screen, because I want to see, well, I can't see you, but maybe you can see me a bit better. I have, if you don't mind, Olena, I have some questions that were already sent to me beforehand.
Yep.
So we can go over those before we go to the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's see, my big chunky eyeglasses. Must the job offer of the principal foreign national be full-time? And here, no. The answer is no. There's no indication exactly that it has to be full-time. It can, as long as it's in an eligible occupation and you comply with the rest of the requirements, like the duration of the authorization to work, yeah, a part-time job offer is good enough. What happens if my spouse stops working or studying after the approval of my spousal open work permit? So if it's already been approved and you're here, nothing. You can still continue working under your spousal open work permit validity of your work permit. So yeah, you can continue working. And that's also applicable if the relationship ends. So if you're already here and for some reason you decide to separate, then you do not think that that means that you need to go back or that you have to stop working. As long as your work permit is still valid, you can continue to work. Let's say, oh, how can I remove restrictions from my work permit? And can I do it after my work permit has been issued? So, and this person was actually referring to the restriction that not being able to work like at daycares and with children and stuff like that. So the way you get rid of that is to actually take a medical test, an IME, an immigration medical exam. And if it's been, yeah, if it has already been issued, you can still request a change. You will have to do it submitting an immigration form 5710 in 5710, and you still need to pay your fees. So that's another thing. What should the employment contract look like? Well, this is very open because there's not specific like requirements, but you do want it to look professional. So I like to see either a job offer letter, or an employment contract with, what do you call it? Letterhead, and of course, including all the main information. So what the duties of your position, the contact information, just what your schedule is going to look like. So yeah, that's basically, there's no like, I don't know what to say about what it should look like, just professional and true. And just make sure that it includes an accurate description of your duties. So yeah, those are the most relevant ones that I have from my list. So let's go ahead and look at the Q&A. Okay. Okay, yeah. So Felicia is asking about spousal sponsorship. Here's what I can tell you is that at the end of the Canadian Immigration Summit, so on the 6th, we're going to have another general Q&A session, and you will be able to get the answer for that one because it is on another topic. It says, does it mean that an applicant is at a great disadvantage if there are no international travel histories? Not necessarily. No, it's not a disadvantage. I say that it's a positive that you can mention. It's not a requirement. And if you don't have any travel history, then you don't have any travel history. There's no specific requirement on that. And there's actually some case law on how having no travel history, no prior travel history, cannot be used as a negative factor when assessing applications. So no, you're not at a disadvantage. Next one, we're in Kitchener and our permit will expire in June 2026. We think we're short with time, so we decided that I will be studying a master program so we can extend our stay and hopefully be PR one day. Problem is all intakes start in September, while permit will expire in June. What do you think the best thing is to do? Well, you can first, you need to either extend your status or leave Canada. you can extend your status through a VR, a visitor record, and extend your status as a visitor. But then you'll have to still apply outside of Canada for your study permit. So yeah, that's definitely something that I would suggest you look for a more specific advice, because you need to you don't want to stay here without status, but you need to understand that whatever steps you take may have consequences later on when you try to apply. And so yeah, and I don't know what kind of permit you have. I assume it's a work permit. You do need to stop working. So even if you decide to stay here, you wouldn't be able to continue working. The code for the consultation, that's Summit, SUMMIT, and you will also get all of that information and the code for consultations with all of the other presenters that presented today in an email at the end of the day. Well, this is not related exactly to spousal open work permits, but I'll answer it anyway. If the PGWP is expiring soon, are we allowed to extend or renew the work permit? A PGWP is a once in a lifetime thing. There's no option to renew your PGWP unless it was issued for a shorter duration that you're allowed to because of the validity of your passport, let's say. Other than that, no, you would need to look into other ways of extending your status, either other type of work permit that you might be eligible for, or a study permit, visitor record if possible, or you would need to leave Canada. What else? Do they look more positive on application with a marriage certificate than common law, or it doesn't matter? You know, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have documentation to prove that your relationship is genuine. For immigration purposes, marriage and common law, it's the same. The only issue is that sometimes it's a bit trickier to prove your common law, so you might want to add additional documentation besides just the statutory declaration. But no, either one is, at the eyes or IRCC, it's considered the same. Must one get a job offer before applying for residence permit? At the BE, I assume you mean before applying for a spousal open work permit. If so, then yes, the principal foreign national needs to either have a job offer for a job that will start or be currently employed. But that's we're talking about the principal foreign national, not the applicant. So the spouse who will be getting a spousal open work permit does not need a job offer. Just the principal foreign national if they are a foreign worker. What else? Do you see any? Let me see the chat. It's if my spouse had tier 2 but is cooked, not apply to give me a work permit to stay in Canada. I assume that you mean that the tier 2 category, it's for cooks. You would need Anna to go and check exactly the list of eligible tier 2 occupations. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, cooks is not included. So unless your spouse is currently working or has a job offer on an eligible occupation, no, you're not eligible for a spousal open work permit. Yay me, could we have high chance to get an approval study permit? If I got a study permit and now working with the PGWP and my husband is planning to apply for a master. Okay, so you each want to apply for another study permit. This is, again, out of the topic of this question. I just don't want to leave you hanging there. So as far as study permits, I just find it weird that you already studied something, then got a PGWP, and then want to study something again. it raises a red flag for me. It would be a very specific application for you to prove why you want to study something else. So that's something, again, that you would definitely need a consultation on to figure out what that program is and what your reasoning would be for going back to school. Other than that, if your husband wants to apply for a master, and yeah, I don't see why not. If he's eligible and you have the funds, sure. Do we need to add pictures of marriage along with the certificate? Not for a spousal open work permit application. This is not the same as spousal sponsorship. We're talking about a spousal open work permit application due to the fact that your foreign national is either an international student or a foreign worker. So if you have a marriage certificate, if it's in any other language that's not English or French, do a professional translation, and that should be enough. Generally speaking, we will have to, unless you have any other red flags in your specific situation. Let's see. Spousal open work. Oh, it's so fast. Spousal open work permit of region open work permit applicant. My spouse has applied for a regional open work permit. Can I extend my open work permit along with his BOWP? Okay, so the information that I gave you here is actually only for those who are not applying for PR. So if your spouse is a PR applicant and already has his Virgin Open Work Permit, yes, you can if they have an eligible occupation, but the requirements are a bit different. So instead of the duration of the work permit being at least 16 months, I believe they can do it even if it's shorter. I think it's 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, but that you would need to confirm. Yeah, because all of the information that I provided was for those who are not applying for PR. How does a foreigner prove relationship of common law partner? Okay, so in order for you to be considered common law, you need to prove that you've been living together as a married couple for at least 12 consecutive months. So you do it with so either a statutory declaration of common law, and depending on the application, you can also include other information, depending if you're applying for PR. That's a whole different issue. But in this case, as long as you've been living together for 12 months, consecutive 12 months in a marriage-like relationship, then you fill up the form. Proof of funds. Proof of funds, you fixed deposits, you do not need to, there's no requirement for proof of funds for a spousal open work permit application. You need to convince IRCC that you have ways to support yourself here in Canada, but there's no actual requirement for specific proof of funds. So yeah, how can I, what is it? It goes so fast. How can I prove work experience? You do it through submitting employment contracts. I'm not sure this applies to my topic, but anyways, you do it through employment contracts, job letters. So from your employer specifying, the time you were there, what your duties were, how much you were paid, your schedule. So yeah, through letters, contracts, and proof of payment. So either tax documents, pay stubs, or bank statements, and a combination of these documents.
Okay, Anna, let's take one last question, and
Sure.
then we'll wrap things up.
Sure. Oh, let's see. Let's go up. Let's see, a new message. I'm a full-time student currently doing on-call job, which is tier 2 eligible. Okay, Tier 2 eligible occupation not code for a spousal open work permit. After completing my studies while applying for PGWP and spousal open work permit, can this job offer work if I work 30 hours per week? Mainly on call is mentioned on my job offer. Will it be okay? So I guess this, as long as your NUC is eligible for a spousal open work permit and you can prove that you're currently working, there's no need to prove that you're working full time. So I want to say that an on-call position is a part-time position. So as long as you comply with and you meet the rest of the requirements, you should be good to go. Yeah, there shouldn't be any other problem.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. Anna, it was amazing. Thank you. And guys, you can find Anna's contact details under our YouTube video. After this, you will also get an email with all the speakers' contact details and, of course, a replay. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we have new set of speakers, new topics, same time, same place. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone.